Welcome to English Speak Pulse, the podcast where your words become your power. I'm Danielle, and today we're diving into a topic that every professional, entrepreneur, and student needs to master: business English. Because whether you're in a meeting, writing an email, or presenting your ideas, the way you speak can open doors, or quietly close them.
And I'm Sarah. You know, I've met so many learners who can speak English fluently. But when it comes to business situations, they freeze. They know what they want to say, but not how to say it politely, clearly, and confidently. That's where today's journey begins.
Exactly. We're going to uncover the most powerful business English phrases you can use in real professional life, in meetings, in emails, and in presentations. These aren't textbook phrases. They're the kind of language that gets attention, builds trust, and makes you sound like a true professional.
And we're not just giving you phrases. We'll show you how to use them naturally through real-life stories, examples, and the psychology behind why they work. Because English for business isn't about being perfect. It's about being effective.
So, if you've ever wondered what to say when your boss asks for updates, when you're writing a tricky email, or when you're standing in front of an audience, stay tuned. This one episode could completely change the way you sound at work.
Let's start strong, because in the business world, first impressions aren't just important. They're everything.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being instantly well-informed. Today, we're really getting into the architecture of influence, specifically mastering that crucial first impression in business English. And we're not talking about, what you're wearing. We mean the actual language you use, those first few seconds.
Exactly. It sounds so simple, maybe even obvious, but those initial words, whether you type them or say them, they really do shape how people see your competence.
Yeah, they can either, open doors for you or just quietly close them, without you even realizing it sometimes.
It's fascinating, actually. There's this psychological thing called anchoring. Basically, whatever you put out there first, your tone, how clear you are, or if you're not clear, it hugely influences how the other person takes in everything else you say afterwards.
So that first bit carries extra weight.
Absolutely. And people often get hyper-focused on the goal, the data they need to share, the action item. They totally forget how they start. But that beginning, it sets the whole mood, the pace, the expectation for everything.
Okay, right. Let's unpack that and make it super practical for everyone listening. Our mission today is to boil this down to powerful professional openings you can use right away. We'll cover the big three: leading meetings, crafting effective emails, and delivering presentations that actually keep people engaged.
Yeah, getting those openings right.
We want to show that confidence isn't just like a feeling you have inside. It's structural. You build it into your opening words with respect and clarity. So let's start with meetings. In the room, face-to-face, or virtual. When you're the one leading, we all know those classic weak starts, right? That kind of hesitant, okay, let's start, or
just a vague, so we're here to talk about the project. It sounds like you just woke up or haven't quite prepared the transition.
Yeah, unprepared.
And for, more seasoned professionals, the mistake can be a bit more subtle. It's not always stumbling. Sometimes it's using what we call hedging language, like, I just wanted to quickly check in about the agenda, or maybe I was hoping we could maybe look at.
Ah, that's softening language. It almost sounds apologetic.
Exactly. It signals doubt. Like you're questioning your own right to lead the meeting or take up their time.
Okay, so if we cut out the hedging, what should a strong opening do? You mentioned 3 key things.
Yeah, 3 essential traits: respect, clarity, and control. Respect, you thank people for being there, for their time. Clarity, you immediately lay out the roadmap, what's happening. And control, you set the pace, you're steering the ship.
Right.
When you project those 3, you instantly sound prepared, professional, and honestly, you make people feel like their time is valued.
Okay, give us the fix then. If I'm running the meeting, how do I inject that structure and sound decisive, not hesitant?
Right, so instead of stumbling, you start with a clear, decisive statement, then immediately the roadmap structure. So something like, good morning, everyone. Thank you for making time today. That's the respect part. Then let's begin with a quick review of the Q3 metrics before we move into the action items for the new strategy. C, past results, current action, future goal. Clear structure.
That really is leadership through language, isn't it? Defining the scope right away. And I think there's a psychological comfort factor too. People don't like ambiguity.
Precisely. You're reducing their mental effort. They know what to expect. Think about, say, leading a weekly marketing meeting. You can open with, good afternoon, everyone. Hope your week's going well. A little bit of warmth. Then straight to it. We are dedicating the next 40 minutes to reviewing our last campaign results, then pivoting immediately to strategy recommendations.
It shows respect for the clock and that you've got a definite plan. No wasted time.
Exactly.
But what about the flip side? What if you're joining a meeting, maybe with senior folks, and you want to make a good, brief impression, not just blend in?
Yeah, good point. You still want to be intentional. Don't just slide in silently. Use polite openers that acknowledge the meeting's importance. You don't have to wait to be called on. You could say something like, "Thanks for inviting me to contribute today." It frames your presence positively. Or, if you know the people, maybe. It's great to see everyone. I'm really looking forward to discussing how we can integrate our teams on this project.
So you're positioning yourself as an active contributor, not just an attendee.
Right. It subtly highlights that you see your time there as valuable.
Okay, let's shift gears from the meeting room vibe to the screen. Business emails, probably the most common tool we all use daily, but maybe the easiest place to make a weak first impression because you lose all the body language, the tone.
I completely agree. The nature of digital tools pushes efficiency, right? But that often means people start way too abruptly, like just opening with the command, send the report.
Yeah.
It just sacrifices all professionalism for speed. It can come across as cold, even a bit rude, like you don't respect the other person's effort.
Right. So the challenge is finding that balance, being warm and professional, but still efficient, sounding human, but organized enough that people take you seriously. I sometimes hear people worry, though. Our polite phrases like, "I hope this message finds you well." A bit too formal, especially if you know the person.
That's a really common question, and it touches on context, maybe even culture sometimes. But think about it. When you're communicating asynchronously, like email, that little bit of, let's call it formality, it actually acts as needed social lubricant.
Social lubricant, I like that.
Yeah, it's a signal of respect. It acknowledges the other person as a person before you jump into the task, the transaction. It stops it sounding like just an automated command.
Okay, so embrace that brief moment of warmth. What about if it's the first time you're reaching out or you're following up?
If you're replying, always good to acknowledge their input first. Thank you for getting back to me so quickly. Shows appreciation.
Makes sense.
For a first contact or starting a new thread, state your purpose clearly right after that opening pleasantry. I'm reaching out to share an update regarding the Q4 rollout schedule. Or maybe, I'm writing to request your input on the attached proposal. Clear purpose.
Right, frames the why immediately. Doesn't bury the lead, as they say. Let's do a direct comparison. Show the contrast in tone.
Sure. Let's imagine you need to send a pretty complex, important project update to a busy manager. Let's call him Mr. Khan. The weak, abrupt, kind of disrespectful opening is just, here is the report. Check it.
Yeah, that puts all the work on him.
Exactly. Now, the professional version, the one that manages his attention, shows you're responsible. Dear Mr. Khan, I hope your week is progressing smoothly. There's the warmth. Please find attached the latest project report, clear statement. Crucially, I've highlighted the key results and recommended next steps in Section 3, and I welcome your feedback on those points by the end of tomorrow.
Wow, okay. That's night and day. You're not just dumping data.
Yeah.
You're managing the whole communication. You gave context, pointed him exactly where to look, set a deadline for feedback. That structure just shouts professionalism.
It elevates the whole interaction.
Okay, moving on to the big one, maybe the scariest for some people, presentations. That moment of truth, that opening line really is make or break, isn't it? The audience decides right then. Listen up or check the phone.
Absolutely. And the most common mistake, wasting those vital opening seconds on stuff that's obvious, like, "Hi, my name is," or reading the title slide.
Yeah, we know who you are, hopefully.
The best presenters get it. They know they're fighting for attention. They have to establish relevance instantly before they even try to inform, sometimes even before the formal intro.
So you need that immediate hook, something with energy that shows why this matters now. I find a lot of people default to almost apologetic openings. Sorry if the slide is busy or something self-deprecating. That just kills your authority right away.
Completely agree. Ditch the apologies, ditch the soft starts. The strategy is a strong rhetorical hook. You can open with a question that sparks curiosity, or maybe a surprising fact that challenges what they think they know, or just a bold, confident statement that sets high expectations.
Okay, let's give the listeners some concrete examples, hooks they could potentially adapt. If you're addressing a problem, maybe something like, "Good afternoon, everyone. Have you ever considered how much revenue we might be losing each quarter just due to inefficient scheduling?"
Yeah, that forces them to think about their pain point immediately. makes it relevant.
Or if you have exciting news or data.
You could use a confidence statement, anchor those positive expectations straight away. Like, I'm really excited to share something that, based on our pilot data, could genuinely help us boost client satisfaction and retention by, say, 20% this year.
That frames the whole talk as a solution, not just an info dump. Makes people lean in.
Exactly. It sets up anticipation. I remember seeing this awful presentation once where the speaker literally read the title slide, then apologized for tech glitches they thought might happen. Just terrible.
Oh, no.
Compare that to, say, a marketing exec launching a big campaign. They need that confidence, no hesitation. They should walk in and say something like, "Good afternoon, everyone. We're not here today to talk about small tweaks. I've got something truly transformative to show you, a digital campaign that could, conservatively, double our engagement in the next 6 months."
That certainty in the tone.
It's everything. That confidence sets the feeling for the entire presentation.
Yeah, it's the difference between asking permission to speak
Yeah.
and demonstrating you have something valuable to say. Authority.
Precisely. Now, before we move into practice tips, maybe we can just consolidate some useful, flexible phrases, vocabulary that works well as connective tissue, in both meetings and presentations.
Good idea. Some go-to phrases.
Things that signal structure and intention, like, "Let's get started by reviewing," or, "Before we begin, I'd just like to provide some brief context for,"
Okay.
or even just a solid welcome. "First of all, thank you for joining us today for this important discussion," or, "I'd like to welcome everyone to today's session. Simple, but effective."
That flexibility is key, being able to use them in different settings. And this actually leads us to a really neat linguistic point. Something subtle but powerful that can make your business English sound much more dynamic, more natural. It's about using the present continuous tense when you're talking about what's happening now in the meeting or presentation.
Yes. This is a huge aha moment for so many learners. It really makes a difference. If you use the simple present, it can sound a bit stiff, almost robotic sometimes, like, "We discuss the budget now," or "We start our session with the findings."
Yeah, sounds like a script. But when you switch to present continuous, that ing form, it creates a much more active, dynamic, conversational feel. "We're discussing the budget right now," or "We're starting our session by reviewing the key findings." It feels like it's happening live.
It implies immediacy, ongoing action. It makes you sound like a guide leading people through something happening right now, not just an announcer reading lines.
Makes your English sound more fluid, more natural, instantly.
It's that linguistic signal that says, we are in this together right now, doing this thing.
So the practical tip here, it's simple, but you really have to do it. Practice these openings out loud. Record yourself on your phone, maybe say the phrase, "Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining today." We're starting by establishing the 3 biggest challenges facing our team. Then listen back. Does your voice sound calm, controlled, or rushed and hesitant? That self-correction is gold.
Absolutely. And remember, the goal isn't just rote memorization. It's about feeling the intention behind the words, the confidence, the clarity. The phrases themselves can be flexible. You might say, "Thank you for joining the discussion earlier today," in an email follow-up.
Right.
And adapt it slightly to, "Thanks everyone for joining the discussion," when you say it live in the meeting. The core intent, showing respect, acknowledging them, stays the same.
Okay, so pulling it all together, what's the big takeaway for your professional life? That first impression, whether it's email, meetings, presentations, it's really a delivery system.
Yeah.
You build it with respect, clarity, and control. Start strong, manage expectations, anchor that positive perception of your competence, and show professionalism right from the get-go.
And maybe a final thought to mull over. If these great openings are fundamentally about creating a positive connection and setting the right tone, how might paying just as much careful attention to the closure, the way you end a conversation, a meeting, an email, how might that impact the lasting impression, the sort of final memory you leave behind?
It's a great point. If the opening anchors perception, maybe the closing secures the memory. Interesting twist. For now, though, take these strong opening strategies we've discussed, feel the intention, try them out in your very next business interaction. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll talk to you next time.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever been in one of those meetings, where people talk and talk maybe for 10 minutes and you're still sitting there thinking, okay, what is actually the point here?
Oh, absolutely. Or you dash off an email, think it's perfectly clear, and then it gets completely misunderstood. Happens all the time.
It really does.
Yeah.
So today, this dive is for you. We're going to cut through some of that noise around professional communication. Our sources, they show this clear pattern. Lots of people, they try to sound, I don't know, sophisticated.
Right, using big words, complex sentences.
Exactly. And all it does is create, well, what we're calling information fiction.
And that friction, it's actually quite costly. It's not just about sounding smart, is it? It's really about getting your point across effectively, getting results. You might have a brilliant idea, truly strategic, but if your delivery is confusing or maybe the tone comes off wrong, like unintentionally demanding.
Yeah, the person on the other end, whether they're across the table or reading your email, they have to work so much harder just to figure out what you actually meant.
Precisely. And they might miss the point, or worse, misunderstand your intention completely. It really undermines the whole interaction. So that's really the core idea for this deep dive. Clarity is power. Simple as that. The best communicators. They use simple, polite, and really precise language. Spot on.
Our mission today is to give you a kind of blueprint. We're talking specific phrases, structures, even a few grammar tips you can use, like straight away. Things to remove that friction and make sure your message lands, understood and respected.
Yeah, because in professional settings, it really isn't just what you say. It's so much about how you structure it, how you deliver it. If you make it easy for people to follow, you don't just get understood.
You build trust, right? You sound confident, reliable.
Exactly. You establish yourself.
Okay, let's kick things off with meetings. The crucible, as you said. This is where that talking in circles thing really happens most often, I think.
It does. People tend to lead with all the background, the context, the supporting detail.
And the history.
Yeah, and only then, right at the end, do they maybe get to the main point. And by then,
your audience is mentally checked out. They're lost.
That lack of structure, it creates this huge cognitive load. You're basically asking listeners to hold all this information in their head before they even know why it matters.
So the sources suggest flipping that structure completely.
Pretty much. Turn it on its head.
Okay, so let's break down that three-part structure for getting an idea across in a meeting. Keep it direct, keep it concise. So first,
just state your main idea. Lead with what you believe or what you're suggesting. Plain and simple.
Okay. Lead with the idea, then second.
Support it. Give the single best reason why, or maybe a quick, clear example, just the core support.
Got it. And third.
Conclude it. Wrap it up politely. Maybe summarize the point and link it to a good outcome.
Okay, let's try that. So instead of a long preamble about project delays,
right,
you'd say something like, I believe we should extend the project deadline by 1 week. That's step one. Okay, main idea stated. Then step two, the why. Because our testing phase needs more time to hit the quality benchmark. Specific reason.
Right.
And step three, the conclusion benefit. Ultimately, this will help us deliver demonstrably better results. Done. Okay, that's, 10 seconds? Super clear. Proposal, reason, benefit. But hang on. If you use that exact formula every single time, won't you start sounding a bit robotic?
That's a really important point. Yes, you could. The structure is the skeleton, right? But politeness, that's the polish. It makes it sound natural, human.
So you don't just launch into I believe every time.
No, you frame it. You use professional but polite introductory phrases. Think of it as inviting discussion, not just issuing a statement.
Okay, so these are like soft introductions. They signal confidence, but not bossiness.
Exactly. You're framing your idea as maybe a suggestion or a perspective, not necessarily a hard fact. It gives people room.
So let's say you're suggesting a new marketing strategy. Instead of just laying it out,
you might say something like, I'd like to suggest a slightly different approach here, or maybe perhaps we could consider exploring X. It softens the entry. Yeah, I like those. Or those perspective ones. From my point of view. Or it seems to me that they feel collaborative. They are. They act like signposts. Here's my thought. What do you think? It invites input rather than shutting it down.
Okay, that makes sense for meetings. Now, what about email? You said structure is even more critical.
Oh, definitely. Because you lose all the nonverbals, right? No body language, no tone of voice to guide interpretation.
Yeah, tone is so easily misread in email.
Exactly. So a direct statement, if it's even slightly poorly phrased, can instantly sound demanding or rude, even if you didn't mean it that way.
We all know the basic difference, like, send me the report soon, versus, could you please share the report by tomorrow? That's obvious politeness.
Right. But it goes beyond just basic manners. This is about professional influence. A clear, polite request sets expectations properly and maintains goodwill. You need both.
It's not weak to be polite. It's professional.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And another key thing for email clarity, simplicity. Keep sentences short. Avoid those massive, dense paragraphs nobody wants to read.
Oh, definitely.
It makes it so much easier to scan and find the actual point or the request. Aim for, scannable in 30 seconds.
So that's a good benchmark. I remember getting an email once, just 3 sentences, all caps, demanding data immediately.
Oof. How did that land?
Badly. I'm sure they just meant, I need this quickly, but the tone felt so aggressive, my gut reaction was defensive. I probably pushed it down my priority list subconsciously.
See, the message itself became the bottleneck because of the delivery.
That's the risk. Politeness bypasses that defensive reaction. So when you're suggesting something in an email, use openers that frame you as helpful, collaborative.
Okay, let's nail down some useful email starters for putting ideas forward. You mentioned I'd like to suggest.
Yeah, or may I recommend. See those modal verbs, like may. They automatically soften things.
Right. You could also use, it might be helpful if we, or maybe, I believe we could improve this by still confident, but inviting.
Precisely. And what if you need to clarify something? Maybe your first attempt wasn't clear or someone misunderstood.
Yeah. Avoid sounding frustrated or, worse, passive-aggressive.
Right. Use specific clarity phrases, gentle but precise. So something like, just to clarify, my suggestion was actually to focus on the Asian market in Q4. It resets the conversation positively. Exactly. Or to make sure we're on the same page, I meant the deadline could be flexible, but only for the initial design phase. You're closing that ambiguity gap yourself. Shows responsibility.
Okay, meetings, emails. Let's talk presentations. Structure and confidence seem absolutely key there. Biggest failure.
Reading slides full of text without ever really stating the main takeaway or the overarching point clearly. Just death by bullet point.
Yeah, presenting data without context.
A presentation needs a roadmap. You have to tell the audience where you're taking them before you start the journey. Our sources often mention the power of 3 here. Structure your core message around, say, 3 key points. Makes sense. So your opening needs to be super clear. Like, today I want to share 3 specific ways we can improve our customer service. Sets the stage immediately. Exactly. Response time, training, feedback loops, whatever they are.
Right.
You've given them a structure, and then as you move through it,
You need those transition phrases to avoid jarring jumps between topics.
crucial. They guide the audience smoothly, make it feel cohesive. Simple works best.
Like, okay, let's move on to the next point, which is our training module.
Or, now that we've covered response time, let's focus on. Or, this brings us to our final topic, just simple verbal signposts.
Okay, but what happens if you do see confusion?
Yeah.
Blank stares in the audience. That's where confidence can wobble.
Right, and that's where the really good presenters shine. They don't freeze, they have a maneuver ready.
So instead of panicking,
You calmly deploy a restatement phrase, something like, let me put it another way, or... So what I mean here is, you're clarifying immediately without making a big deal of it.
taking control of the clarification. I like that. And here's a pro tip from the sources. Use gentle check-in questions. After explaining something important, ask something like, does that make sense so far?
Okay. I might have thought that sounded a bit insecure, asking that.
Not at all. It's actually a sign of leadership, of emotional intelligence. You're checking for understanding, inviting quiet feedback, keeping people engaged. Shows you care if they're following.
Right, it makes it feel more like a dialogue, even if it's mostly you talking.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered meetings, emails, presentations. Let's loop back to something you mentioned earlier, the grammar. Specifically, modal verbs for politeness. This feels like a core tool.
It really is. It's probably the single biggest linguistic tweak you can make for a better professional tone. It's fundamentally about choosing cooperation over, say, command.
Modal verbs, so words like could, would, might. Exactly, they work because they introduce a bit of psychological distance. If you say, we must change this, it sounds like an order, assumes total authority.
Okay.
But if you say, we could change this, suddenly it's a possibility. You've softened the absolute nature of it. You're opening a door, not closing one.
I see. The psychological effect is quite different then. It feels less like being told what to do and more like being invited to solve something together.
Precisely. It shifts the dynamic from command and control to collaboration. Think about a basic request. Instead of just complete this report by Friday.
Which can sound a bit abrupt.
Yeah.
You use the modal. Would you mind completing this report by Friday? That one word, would, transforms it. It's respectful, it's flexibility, but with purpose. Flexibility with purpose. I like that. And this idea applies across the board, right? We used the example of expanding a project timeline earlier. How would that adapt?
Well, the core idea stays the same, but the delivery changes depending on the channel.
Okay, so in a meeting, Maybe a bit more assertive, but still collaborative, right? In a meeting, you might use that perspective frame. From my point of view, extending the timeline will help us dramatically improve our final results. Clear, confident uses will help, which is strong. Okay? And then for an email, more concise, action-oriented, in an email, maybe lean on that supportive modal. I'd like to suggest expanding the project timeline to ensure better quality outcomes. Brief, suggest value, easy to reply to. Got it. And finally, in a presentation, maybe project more team confidence.
Exactly. In a presentation, you might phrase it as, our team believes that an extended timeline will allow us to deliver stronger, more robust results. Projects, unity, and certainty. Same core idea, 3 different context-appropriate deliveries. That's really useful to see side by side. So, okay, wrapping this up. What does this all mean for you, the listener? It's not just about memorizing phrases, is it?
No, not at all. It's about integrating this the structure, the politeness, the precision into how you approach communication naturally.
So how can people start practicing this? Well, a simple writing exercise works wonders. Take an email you need to send this week where you're making a suggestion. First, draft it, starting directly, maybe with I think.
Okay.
Then rewrite that same email, but start it with a softer modal-based phrase like I'd like to suggest, or perhaps we could consider. Just compare how they feel. Which one sounds more professional, more inviting?
That's a great practical tip. And what about listening?
Yeah, don't forget listening practice. Pay attention to people you think are great communicators in your field. Notice their word choices, sure, but also their intonation. And crucially, how they use pauses.
Pauses, interesting.
Yeah, because effective communication is really about more than just words. It reflects emotional intelligence, respect for the listener's time and attention.
Which brings us nicely to our final thought for you to mull over. We've talked structure, tone, modals. But don't underestimate the power of silence. In really clear professional communication, sometimes a short intentional pause just before you state your main point. It doesn't signal weakness or that you're lost for words.
No, quite the opposite.
Right. It creates this little vacuum of attention. It gives your words weight, makes them land with more impact. So maybe experiment with that, using just a brief silence intentionally to amplify your clarity. See how that feels. Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, everyone talks about communication being key in the professional world, right?
Absolutely. It's like the #1 skill everyone lists.
But then you hit those moments, those really high-stakes situations. Maybe you're trying to push back on a budget cut or ask for a big shift in a timeline or counter a proposal right in front of a client.
Yeah.
And suddenly that skill gap feels, well, massive. How do you actually agree or disagree or negotiate in English without sounding rude or maybe aggressive or, just ineffective?
That really is the moment of truth, isn't it? We all kind of know not to say things like, that's just wrong, that's obvious. But the real challenge and what we see in the sources, it's much more subtle than that.
How so?
It's about dealing with disagreement when the other person, maybe it's your boss, is really invested in their idea. The core truth, I think, in business is conflict just happens. It's inevitable. So the way you deliver that disagreement, that's what makes the difference. It decides if people see you as, diplomatic and capable, a problem solver, or if they just see you as difficult.
So our mission today isn't just about being polite, is it? It's more about these strategic language upgrades, things that help you get what you need while keeping those professional relationships strong, maybe even making them stronger.
Exactly.
We've really dug into the sources to find those specific phrases, the ones that work almost like linguistic scaffolding, keeping your point firm but softening the edges.
Yeah, those little tools that make a big difference.
Okay, so let's jump right into meetings. That active conversational space. The most surprising thing I found was about the psychology behind disagreeing. It seems it doesn't start with your objection at all.
No, it doesn't. It starts with acknowledging their point first, validating their input.
Why is that so critical?
Well, think about it. If you just immediately fire back with your counterpoint, you often trigger this defensive reaction in the listener. It's almost like fight or flight. And once that happens, they basically stop hearing your logic. They're just prepping their own rebuttal. But if you acknowledge their view first, even if you disagree with the core of it, it stops them from going into that defensive mode.
So they're actually more open to hearing what you say next.
Precisely. It makes them instantly more receptive.
That's fascinating. So it's less about just being nice and more about strategically managing the emotional response.
Exactly. Emotional regulation in communication.
So instead of that blunt, I disagree, The sources suggest these subtle pivoting phrases.
Yeah, you need to show you've actually processed what they said. Try softening the tone with phrases that acknowledge first, then introduce the friction. Something like, I see your point, but maybe we could look at it another way.
It's the structure.
Validate.
Gentle transition, then your alternative.
That's the key structure.
I particularly like the ones that use partial agreement. Like, you're absolutely right about the budget constraints, but perhaps we need to adjust the timeline slightly to maintain quality.
Yes, that's a great example. It shows you listened, you validated part of it, and your objection isn't random. It's tied to a shared goal, like quality.
Okay, but what about when you do agree?
Right, we can't forget that. A simple yes can actually be quite passive. It almost sounds like you're checking out of the conversation.
I hadn't thought of that way.
You need to show engaged agreement to keep your professional standing.
Right. It's the difference between sounding like, well, a subordinate just nodding along and sounding like an active, engaged peer.
Exactly. So instead of just yes, try phrases like, that's a really valid point, or I completely agree with you on that.
Or to really emphasize the collaboration.
You could say something like, I couldn't agree more. That's exactly the direction I was thinking we should explore next. See how that shifts things.
Yeah, it definitely does. Those little upgrades suddenly make you sound like you're co-piloting the strategy, not just sitting in the back seat.
Precisely. You're an active driver.
Okay, let's test this. Classic meeting scenario. Your manager, really enthusiastic, suggests a super fast launch for a product. Accelerated timeline. But you know this pace will basically kill the final testing phase.
High stakes. Definitely.
Yeah. How do you use this diplomatic language to push back without sounding negative or unsupportive?
Okay, well, you need to frame your objection carefully. Tie it back to a value you both share, like a quality or maybe long-term success. And critically, introduce the idea conditionally.
Conditionally. How so?
You could say something like, I completely understand the drive to launch quickly, and that makes sense. However, I am a bit concerned we might need a little more time for thorough testing. If we were to extend the timeline by just 1 week, say, we would be able to ensure the quality is absolutely flawless before we go live.
I see. That's where those small grammar tools really pack a punch. You're already using if and would, even right there in the meeting, to turn what could be a hard no into more of a collaborative option.
Exactly. You've presented a choice, speed now, maybe with some risks, or flawless quality just a little bit later. It puts the decision back in a shared space.
Makes sense. Okay, so that's meetings. Now let's shift gears. Emails.
Right. Moving from spoken to written, we've talked a lot about face-to-face dynamics, but emails are a different beast, aren't they? You lose all the visual cues, the body language.
Totally. And I think we've all felt that anxiety. Trying to disagree clearly but politely in an email, it's tough.
It really is. The sources are very clear on this. Emails carrying a huge risk of misinterpreting tone. That phrase, I don't agree with this, it just looks so much harsher in black and white.
Yeah, much more aggressive than if you said it softly in person.
Definitely. So you absolutely need specific diplomatic phrasing to bridge that written distance.
So what works?
Well, word choice becomes everything. Instead of that harsh pushback, you need language that shows respect and gives a little distance. Maybe try. I can see your perspective on this approach, but I have a slightly different opinion when it comes to the timeline.
Okay, so you're confirming you got their idea, but gently signaling a different direction.
Exactly. Or another good one for an email response is, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. I'd like to perhaps suggest an alternative approach, maybe one that focuses more on the client feedback we got last month.
Ooh, I like that. You're not just disagreeing. You're immediately backing up your alternative with data or a reason. That adds firmness in writing, doesn't it?
It does, yes. And again, just like in meetings, agreement in emails needs to be specific to really build collaboration. Just writing sounds good tells the other person basically nothing.
Right, it's kind of dismissive.
It can feel that way. Instead, try. I completely agree with your suggestion about simplifying the design. That change will definitely save us time and streamline the whole process, see? You acknowledge their specific idea and its benefit.
It builds that collaborative feeling, even through email. Okay, this brings us back to what seems like a core rule for email negotiation. When you disagree or you need to ask for a change, you absolutely have to calmly explain why. Logic seems to be the politeness filter in writing.
Absolutely. The logic provides that essential firmness without sounding demanding. If you're pushing back on, say, skipping a required step, you state the likely consequence politely.
Give me an example.
Something like, While I understand your concern about the current workload, I think we might face significant delays in final approval if we skip the mandatory legal review process. It's polite, it's logical, but it's also firm about that non-negotiable step.
Okay, let's try a specific email negotiation scenario. You're managing a big project, unforeseen issues pop up, and you need, say, a 3-day deadline extension. But your client is already stressed about the timing.
Yeah, tricky. You can't sound demanding, and you definitely can't sound like you messed up or are incapable.
Right. How do you handle that?
This is where you really lean into that solution-oriented conditional language. You don't lead with the problem or a refusal. Frame the request around a shared goal, like quality.
So not, we can't finish by Friday.
Definitely not. Instead, maybe something like, we're working hard and doing our absolute best to meet the Friday deadline. However, looking at the remaining tasks, would it be possible to extend the deadline to the following Monday? If we had those 3 extra days, it would allow us to include comprehensive stress testing, ensuring a higher quality deliverable for you in the end.
Okay.
Right.
That completely reframes it. The client isn't just deciding whether to give you more time because you're behind. They're deciding if they want higher quality in exchange for 3 more days.
Exactly. It's subtle linguistic leverage. You're turning a potential problem into a shared decision about improving the outcome.
That's really smart. Okay, so from email, let's step onto the public stage presentations.
Right. The high pressure zone. You're up there, maybe in front of colleagues, clients, stakeholders, and someone publicly challenges your main point, your core proposal.
Yeah, that immediate defensive feeling we talked about. It's like amplified by 100 when it's public.
Totally. And maintaining your authority, your composure, is everything in that moment.
Staying calm seems absolutely critical because reacting defensively makes you look unsure, right? Unsure of your own data or proposal.
Instantly. So you need phrases ready to go, ones that acknowledge the question or concern respectfully, but also smoothly redirect the focus back to your message and your expertise.
So what kind of voices work there?
Well, you want ones that respect the questioner but keep you in control of the flow. If someone throws out a really complex, maybe slightly off-topic question, don't let it derail you.
Right.
You could use something like, that's a very interesting question. Let's look at the implementation details more closely, which I actually cover on slide 14. Or maybe more directly, I see your concern there. Here's how our risk mitigation plan is specifically designed to manage that type of issue.
Okay, that keeps things moving. But what if they directly challenge your data or your main conclusion right there in front of everyone?
Yeah, that's tougher. You never want to dismiss the person asking, but you have to bring the discussion back to your authoritative material, your evidence.
So how would that sound?
Maybe something like, I completely understand your point regarding the initial investment costs. That's a fair concern. However, our internal data, which we've tracked over the last 2 years, suggests a different long-term trend when it comes to the return on investment. You acknowledge their perspective, but you firmly anchor your response in your evidence.
Okay, let's use that classic scenario. You're presenting a proposal for a new, maybe expensive software tool. Someone in the audience speaks up, objects publicly, saying, hey, similar tools failed here before.
Yes. We tried that before and it didn't work. Objection. Very common.
How do you respond persuasively without getting defensive?
Okay, first you have to validate the history they're bringing up. Acknowledge that past experience. Then you need to provide specific current reasons why this time is different.
So validate, then differentiate.
Exactly. You could say something like, that's a really valid point, and you're right, we definitely learned some important lessons from that previous attempt. This time, though, the key difference is we're integrating this new tool with our updated cloud infrastructure, which fundamentally solves those compatibility issues we ran into before.
Got it. So you've validated their experience, which builds a bit of rapport. You've neutralized the old objection by acknowledging it. And then you've highlighted the specific new factor that makes your current plan better.
And hopefully you did it all without breaking a sweat. That's commanding authority under pressure.
Right. Okay, so we've covered meetings, emails, presentations. Let's try and synthesize some of the key tools we've discussed. Vocabulary, grammar, overall strategy.
Yeah, it's clear that these seemingly small linguistic choices have a big impact on how you're perceived professionally. If you want to sound, professional but also solution-oriented, it helps to remember those core categories of language.
Like agreeing, disagreeing, negotiating.
Exactly. Simple agreeing. That's a great idea. Diplomatic disagreeing. I'm not sure I fully agree with that point. Or perhaps we should consider another angle here. And negotiating phrases like, Let's see if we can find some middle ground, or maybe we can compromise on this particular point.
And we've talked quite a bit about the power of conditionals, using if and would to soften things, especially demands or requests.
Hugely important. It's the difference between we need more time, which is a demand.
And if we had another day, we would be able to refine the report, which sounds like a collaborative proposal.
Precisely. That tiny grammatical shift might be one of the most powerful tools we've looked at today. It turns potential conflict into negotiation.
Definitely.
And we also need to underline the strategy of active listening. I really believe negotiation, at its heart, is about listening better, not just talking more. The person who truly listens tends to find the smarter compromise.
So what are those active listening cues, the phrases that really build trust?
Well, they're phrases that explicitly show you're processing the other person's perspective. That really disarms people. Things like, okay, I understand what you mean regarding the logistical challenge there, or that crucial clarifying question. Let me just make sure I've understood this correctly. Are you suggesting we prioritize the user interface over the back-end functionality for now?
Right, because asking that shows you're genuinely engaged in trying to get it right before you respond.
Exactly. It paves the way for a much more productive response.
Okay, so to tie this all together, let's revisit that common tension we see. Speed versus quality. That one core conflict needs different diplomatic language depending on the context, right? Meeting, email, presentation.
Right. So in a dynamic meeting where collaboration is front and center, you might lean towards suggesting maybe we should focus on getting the quality right first, and then we can look at optimizing for speed. More suggestive.
Okay, and in a more formal email where the tone needs careful handling,
You might rate something firmer, but still polite. Ultimately, maintaining quality remains our top priority, and we would appreciate your support in ensuring we achieve that standard. More direct, using request implicitly.
Got it. And finally, in that public presentation where you need to sound completely authoritative and persuasive about the long-term vision.
Then you state it with confidence, backed by evidence. Our research clearly shows that a robust focus on quality ensures long-term customer success and significantly reduces costly rework down the line. Same core message, quality matters, but the delivery is tailored perfectly.
Tailored to the medium and what the audience needs to hear.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And finally, let's just quickly review that elegant 3-step structure for disagreeing politely in writing. It seemed really useful.
Ah, yes, the email diplomacy formula. It really works. Step 1, start with appreciation. Thank you for sending over your input. I found it really helpful. Step 2, state your different view, but softly. I just have a slightly different perspective on the execution strategy we discussed.
Gentle pivot.
Exactly. And step 3, offer the reason or a potential solution. Perhaps doing it this way might help us improve the overall outcome by mitigating X risk. That structure gives you respect, clarity, and that firm logic all bundled together.
Fantastic. These really are powerful upgrades, aren't they? Small shifts in language, but they make the difference between sounding, uncertain or maybe even aggressive, and sounding confident, credible, and really strategic.
They really do. It's how you maximize your professional impact, often with just minimal tweaks to how you say things.
So what's the final thought we want to leave our listeners with?
I think it comes down to this. Professional communication, especially navigating these tricky areas, is ultimately about emotional control. And like any skill, that control needs conscious practice.
Suck us out.
We'd really encourage you, the listener, to take specific situations you might face. Maybe a colleague suggests working over the weekend, or your manager insists on launching something earlier than you think is wise. Actually, practice saying the responses out loud. Practice both the polite agreement phrases and the diplomatic disagreement phrases we talked about.
Actively rehearse using those soft phrases.
Yes, because by doing that, you're mastering not just the words, but also the emotional composure you need to handle those high-stakes moments effectively when they happen for real. That consistent practice, that focus on controlling your own reaction and choosing your words carefully, that's the final step, I think, to truly mastering professional English communication. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something critical: advanced business communication. And not just, the words you use, but how you actually manage things when the pressure's on. Real communication control.
Exactly. We spend so much time on grammar, vocabulary, but the sources we looked at, they're clear. Your professional rep, it's really forged in those tough moments. It's all about how you react. When you get interrupted or slammed with criticism you didn't expect, or, you're facing someone really impatient or angry.
Yeah, that reacting versus responding thing, that's huge, isn't it? So our mission today is to unpack the playbook for those, let's say, strategic professional responses. And it seems like this kind of composure, it really boils down to maybe 3 core pillars.
That's right. We found 3 main things came up again and again. First, just the foundational power of the pause, using it to keep your physical, your vocal self in check.
Okay, the pause. Got it.
Second, mastering those buffer phrases. They buy you time when you're caught off guard. Super useful.
Buffer phrases.
Yeah.
Like delaying tactics, but polite.
Exactly. And third, there's this diplomatic method for handling criticism. How to take feedback without getting, defensive.
Okay. Pause, buffer, diplomacy for criticism.
Master those 3. You stop looking nervous. You start projecting this really solid control. And that's incredibly powerful anywhere, really.
All right, so let's start with the foundation then, the pause.
Yeah, the pause.
It sounds almost too simple, but the problem's real. When we get stressed or nervous or just surprised, our bodies just go into fight or flight mode, and our voice, it speeds up, gets higher.
Instantly gives the game away. It screams lack of control, even if your actual words are fine.
So what's the practical fix? What do the sources say?
Well, they give us 3 sort of physical tricks. Quick things to reset yourself and sound thoughtful, not frantic. Simple? Yeah, but they take discipline.
Okay, lay them on us.
First,
Yeah.
literally just pause before you speak. 1 second, maybe 2. That's it. Yep. Enough time for the thinking part of your brain to catch up with the panic part. It's like hitting a mini reset button. Executive control.
Okay, 1 or 2 seconds. What else?
Second, focus on breathing. Slow, deep breath. It actually lowers that physiological stress response, helps stabilize your voice too.
Right, the classic take a deep breath advice, it actually works.
It really does. And the third one, this one's kind of fascinating. Smile lightly.
Smile, even if you're dealing with something serious or someone angry, seems weird.
It feels counterintuitive, I know, especially in a tense meeting. But it works on 2 levels. Physically, it makes you relax your throat muscles, your vocal cords just slightly. That softens your tone automatically, makes you sound less harsh, more approachable.
Ah, okay, a physical effect.
And psychologically, it kind of helps you break out of that defensive tunnel vision thinking. A small physical shift can change your mental state.
I'm still wondering, though, how well does this work when things are really heated? Like an actually aggressive customer or a colleague who's, losing it. Is a little smile going to cut it?
Good question. And the answer is crucial. You absolutely do not match their energy.
Really? Don't match them?
No. That's the key insight. If someone's going loud and fast, you have to deliberately do the opposite. Lower your energy, slow your speech, write down, drop your volume. It's sometimes called emotional mirroring disruption. Basically, you force their brain to adjust to your calm baseline, not the other way around. Calmness has this weird power. It can actually be contagious.
Okay, so stay low energy, and I guess this leads to that other golden rule. Never, ever, ever tell someone who's angry to calm down.
Oh, God, no. Worst thing you can do, instant escalation. Guaranteed.
Right, throws gasoline on the fire.
Totally, because it invalidates how they feel.
Yeah.
Instead, you use that slow, steady voice, but with empathetic language. You validate the feeling without getting sucked into the drama.
So you acknowledge the emotion.
Yes. Shift the focus away from their anger and towards a solution. Use phrases like, I understand this is frustrating, slow, calm. Let's look at the next steps together. Or maybe, I hear your concern. Let's focus on how we can fix this particular issue. See? You acknowledge the storm, but you're steering the ship towards, somewhere productive.
That kind of tactical response, it flows really nicely into the second pillar you mentioned, the buffer phrase. Because when someone hits you with a question you weren't expecting, that panic response kicks in again. You rush, you stammer, or you just say, I don't know.
Which just tanks your credibility instantly. Yeah. The professional strategy here is don't answer a critical question off the cuff if you're not 100% sure. You pause. Remember pillar 1.
Right, pause first.
And then you manage the question using what we're calling polite delay phrases. Buffer phrases. You're basically buying yourself time. Maybe just 3 to 5 seconds to think straight, or maybe you're buying a few hours to actually go check the data and give a proper answer later.
Okay, buying time sounds good, but doesn't that risk sounding evasive, like you're dodging the question?
That's the danger, yeah, if you do it badly. But the difference between dodging and, let's call it strategic buffering, it's all in the words you choose. You need phrases that sound confident, that sound appreciative of the question, responsible, not ones that just shut the door.
Okay, so give me some examples. What does a good buffer phrase sound like?
All right. Something like, "That's a really good question. Let me just take a second to structure my response properly." See? Confident. Buys time. Or maybe, I hadn't actually considered that specific angle before. That's an interesting point. You're validating their question, showing respect even while you delay.
I like that. Validating the question itself.
Yeah. Or you can be more direct about needing info. "I'd like to check the latest details before I respond fully." Or, "I want to make sure I'm giving you the most up-to-date figures on that."
It frames the delay as being about accuracy, not avoidance.
Exactly. Accuracy over speed. That projects responsibility.
Okay, let's try a scenario. You're presenting maybe to senior managers, and the CFO suddenly asks, "Why did sales drop 15% last quarter?" And you know the general reasons, maybe, but not the exact breakdown off the top of your head.
Right. High pressure moment.
The weak response is, well, I think it was seasonal factors, maybe.
Oh.
Like just stumbling.
Yeah, sounds awful, unsure, weak. The confident, leader-like response, totally different vibe. You pause, then, "That's a great question." And knowing the specific drivers is absolutely key. Acknowledge first.
Acknowledge.
Then the buffer. I'd like to double-check the exact figures for the regional breakdown to give you a precise, actionable answer on that. State your plan and the follow-up. I can get you a detailed report outlining those causes this afternoon. Clear commitment.
Wow. Okay, so you didn't just delay. You showed you were taking it seriously, you're committed to accuracy, and you gave a concrete next step.
Exactly. That feels like control. That's the impression you want to leave.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So speaking of high pressure, let's move to maybe the ultimate test, Pillar 3. Handling criticism or disagreement.
Ah, yes. The true test of workplace emotional maturity, right? This is where so many people just lose it, go straight into defensive mode.
It's almost instinctual, isn't it? Someone criticizes your work, you immediately want to justify, explain, maybe even push back.
It absolutely is. That defensive impulse is strong, which is why the golden rule here is so important. Never react defensively. Full stop.
Easier said than done. How do you actually stop that impulse in the moment?
Well, first, pillar 1 again, pause. Take that breath. Don't just blurt out the first defensive thing that comes to mind. Then you force yourself, and it might feel forced at first, to acknowledge the other person's perspective first, even if you think they're totally wrong.
Acknowledge first, even if you disagree. Why?
Because acknowledgement is like verbal diffusion. It lowers the temperature. The person criticizing feels heard, validated, even a little bit. That opens the door for a real conversation instead of an argument.
Okay, so you need some go-to acknowledgement phrases ready, like locked and loaded.
Exactly. Keep them simple. Things like, "Okay, I see what you mean," or "That's a valid concern," or the classic, super useful one, "I appreciate your feedback."
I appreciate your feedback, even if you hate the feedback.
Especially if you hate it. It's diplomatic. It shows maturity. It doesn't mean you agree with the feedback, just that you appreciate them giving it.
Got it. So you
I think-
acknowledge. Then what? You can't just leave it there if you do have a counterpoint.
Right. So after the acknowledgement, then you can pivot gently. You combine the two steps. Acknowledge, then explain or offer your perspective. The pivot word is often key. Something like "however," or "at the same time," or "the data suggests," for example. That's a valid concern. Pause. However, the data we have suggests that this approach actually gives us better long-term results because of X, Y, and Z.
Acknowledge, pivot, explain. It sounds much more structured and less, well, argumentative.
Precisely. Diplomatic, confident, professional, not defensive.
Okay, let's do another scenario. Classic office ambush. You're in a team meeting, and a colleague says, maybe a bit too loudly, "Your report missed some key data points," in front of everyone. Ouch.
Yeah, awkward. Public criticism.
How does the professional response shut that down gracefully?
Okay. Deep breath first. Then calm acknowledgement. No debate. Something like, thanks for pointing that out. Keep your tone neutral, maybe even appreciative.
Skanks.
Yeah. Or, okay, thanks for catching that. Then immediate solution focus. I'll double check those figures right after this meeting and update the document immediately.
So accept the input, offer the fix, move on. No big discussion.
Exactly. You don't get drawn into a public debate about whether the data points were actually key or not. You just show you're responsive and responsible. You protect your image by demonstrating maturity, not insecurity.
This whole theme, managing the flow, controlling the interaction, It brings us to some quicker techniques, maybe, like an assertive toolkit.
Yeah, some specific tactics for specific situations, like interruptions. Someone just cuts you off mid-sentence. Happens all the time.
Annoying, right? And it can feel disrespectful.
It can be. It's a challenge to your sort of right to speak. So you need a polite way to regain the floor, show self-respect without being aggressive.
So not just letting them steamroll you.
Definitely not.
Right.
But also not snapping back. You need phrases like, if I could just finish this point on the budget quickly, polite but firm. Or maybe, just 1 second, please. I'd like to complete this thought before we move on. It sets a clear professional boundary.
Okay. And what about the flip side? Sometimes you need to interrupt someone, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to be that guy.
Right. And here, the key is the softening phrase before you jump in. Ask permission, essentially. Instead of just talking over them, try, sorry to jump in, but may I add something quickly that relates to that? Or if I could just interrupt for a moment, I think this connects to the delivery dates you mentioned. It shows respect for their time.
That makes sense. It's about being assertive, not aggressive.
Exactly. And that links to misunderstandings too. Someone clearly hasn't grasped what you said. The goal is clarity, not making them feel dumb.
Yeah, you definitely want to avoid saying things like, no, you misunderstood me, or that's not what I said. Puts them on the defensive immediately.
Right. The diplomatic move is to subtly take the blame for the miscommunication onto your explanation.
Yeah.
Not their listening. Use self-facing phrases. You know what, let me try rephrasing that. Perhaps I wasn't clear. Or, sorry for the confusion there. Let me clarify exactly what I meant by scaling. Fixes the issue, saves space for everyone.
Subtle but effective. And finally, you mentioned grammar. Something about modal verbs.
Yes. This is a really powerful tool for diplomacy, often overlooked. Using modals like could, might, would, may, they soften everything. They turn commands into requests. They create a little bit of polite distance.
Okay, give me an example.
Compare the bluntness of send me the report versus the much softer, could you please send me the report when you get a chance? Huge difference in tone.
Yeah, definitely less demanding.
Or think about stopping someone talking. Stop talking is incredibly rude. But could we perhaps hold questions until the end? Is perfectly professional, even firm.
Yeah.
That small grammatical shift.
Yeah.
Using the modal, that's often the difference between sounding like a bossy amateur and a polished professional, especially when you need to set boundaries.
Wow. Okay, so it's these little things, the pause, the buffer phrase, the way you acknowledge criticism, even just using could instead of a direct command.
They seem small, don't they? These little sentences, these pauses, but they add up. They are genuinely powerful tools for communication control. They project massive confidence, maturity.
So if you bring all this together, you're not just managing one conversation, you're actually managing your whole professional reputation over time.
That's it, exactly. This isn't just about, sounding polite. It's about showing everyone that you're thoughtful, you're responsible, and crucially, that you are unshakable when things get tough.
Because people remember how you handle the pressure.
That's the core takeaway for you listening. Honestly, in the working world, people will remember how you reacted when things went sideways, way more than they'll remember the technical details you discussed when everything was easy. The difficult situation, it's not really a problem. It's actually your biggest opportunity to showcase real professionalism. High stakes, high reward.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about, a little challenge for you. Consider one specific tricky conversation you have regularly. Maybe it's with a difficult client, maybe that colleague who always interrupts. And identify just one assertive but still polite phrase from today that you can use next time to immediately take control of that conversation's flow. And maybe start practicing your pause right now. Just take a second. Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever sent an email suggesting a pretty big change and then gotten a really defensive reply?
Oh, definitely. Or, struggled to give feedback on a colleague's work without sounding like you're just nitpicking everything.
Exactly. That's what we're cracking open today. We're looking at the essential mechanics of professional communication.
Right. How to give feedback, how to make suggestions effectively.
And maybe most importantly, how to use language to actually build team harmony, not create resentment.
That really is the core challenge, isn't it? We know we need to be honest at work, but we also have to be respectful. And the quality of your communication, specifically, I think, your tone, it completely dictates the kind of response you're going to get back.
Yeah.
It's like this tightrope walk, trying to deliver necessary critique without making someone feel attacked or get defensive.
Absolutely. So our mission today, really digging into the sources, it all seems to boil down to one thing. Tone is everything. We're not just looking for like a list of polite phrases. We want to analyze the actual tools you need to make your words sound professional, yes, but also encouraging and collaborative.
And the idea is, by really internalizing these techniques, maybe just adjusting your phrasing a little bit, you, the listener, can significantly boost your own influence and effectiveness.
Right.
You start turning those friction points, those potential arguments, into chances to solve problems together. It's about making sure you're heard clearly and, importantly, respectfully, every time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where's the most common place this happens? I guess meetings, right? That high-stakes environment for feedback right on the spot.
Oh, absolutely. The meeting room. Someone finishes a presentation, and now it's feedback time.
So what's the structure? Is there like a non-negotiable, essential way to give balanced feedback that doesn't immediately put someone's back up?
Yes, there is. You absolutely need a buffer. Because direct criticism often just lands like an attack, doesn't it? So the sources really push this three-part structure. Positive suggestion, positive. And it's not just about being nice. It's actually a psychological technique.
Okay, tell us the sequence. And what are we trying to avoid here? What does this structure actually do?
It avoids the recipient just shutting down immediately. So the structure is, 1, you start with some genuine appreciation. Praise something specific they did well.
Okay.
2, then you share your suggestion clearly, but, and this is a key, phrase it as a potential refinement, maybe an idea, not some mandatory fix.
Got it.
And 3, you wrap it up by reaffirming their overall effort or, the success of the presentation generally. End on a positive.
Okay, let's make that concrete. Imagine someone just gave a really detailed presentation. Maybe it ran a bit long. The source material had this great example. Something like, I really liked your presentation, especially that strong opening. And how you synthesized the data on slide 3 was great. One suggestion, maybe we could trim the data section just a bit, just to keep the audience fully engaged right through the Q&A. But overall, really clear, very confident delivery.
See the power there.
Yeah.
You immediately frame yourself as an ally, as someone on their side.
Yeah.
You delivered the core feedback, shortened the data, but you wrapped it in genuine, solid support. So the person hears, okay, they value my work and they want to help make it even better, instead of just hearing you talked for too long.
Right. It shifts you from being a critic to being a collaborator.
Exactly. Critic to collaborator. That's the goal.
Okay, that structure makes a ton of sense for reacting to something like a presentation. But what about when you're proactively bringing up ideas? Making suggestions yourself. If I just walk in and say, we should do this, it can sound kind of strong.
It can sound aggressive, yeah?
Yeah.
Or like a command, not a suggestion. And that tends to shut down discussion because it implies you've already figured it all out.
Yeah.
So the key here is softening your language.
How?
Specifically, using those diplomatic, polite modal verbs. Words like could, might, maybe, perhaps.
Ah, okay. So this is where language gets really strategic. These little words might they actually change the whole dynamic?
Completely. By using them, you're signaling that it's an option, it's open for discussion.
Yeah.
And paradoxically, that actually makes people more likely to consider your idea.
Huh. Because it feels less like you're forcing it on them.
Precisely. You sound confident, but also humble. Look at the difference in these examples the sources gave.
Okay.
Instead of review this part again, maybe we could review this part again. Feels different, right?
Yeah, much gentler.
Or instead of, we need a different approach. We might want to consider a different approach. Instead of just explore another option, you could say, could we explore another option for this project?
It's an invitation.
Exactly. Or even, perhaps we can test this method before we roll out the final version. Each one invite partnership. It makes the idea feel like ours, not just yours.
Okay, that makes sense.
And this is absolutely vital when you disagree with someone, maybe a colleague or even a client, presents an idea you think has, a big flaw.
Right. You can't just say, that won't work.
Never.
Yeah.
You have to maintain respect, acknowledge their effort first, avoid that kind of harsh rejection.
So what's the move? How do you build on it collaboratively, keep their dignity intact, but still steer things in a better direction?
Well, you acknowledge the initial thought, find something positive like, that's an interesting framework. Then you use that modal verb to gently guide it. Maybe we could also try partnering with local businesses. That might help us reach new clients and address that scalability point we talked about last month.
So you're treating their idea like a starting point, a foundation.
Exactly. Not like a dead end you have to reject. You're building together.
Okay, let's switch gears slightly. Where tone gets maybe the trickiest, the most easily misunderstood, written communication. Emails.
Email, yes. A minefield for tone.
Because you lose everything, right? No voice inflection, no body language. You're just left with the words.
You are. And you have to rely entirely on polite phrasing to convey any warmth or positive intent.
Yeah.
We've all gotten those emails right, where the request was probably fine, but it just landed harshly.
Totally, because they didn't soften it.
Exactly. So when you're writing, especially about corrections or needing clarification, you almost have to overcompensate for that lack of nonverbal cues.
Okay, let's do a classic before and after. Give us the before, the common mistake people make when pointing out an error in writing.
Okay, the before might be something like, you made mistakes in the report, fix them by 5 p.m.
Ouch. Yeah, direct, accusatory.
Right. Blame plus a command. It feels like a telling off.
Okay, now give us the diplomatic after.
The after could be, hi, Name. I was just reviewing the report and noticed a few small things. Could you please take another look before we send out the final version? Would appreciate your prompt attention on this. Thanks.
Okay. So, a few small things. Could you please? Focusing on the goal sending the final version, that feels completely different.
It's purely professional, non-accusatory. It changes the focus from you messed up to let's make this report perfect for the audience.
Yeah, like instead of bluntly saying this part doesn't make sense, you might write, could we perhaps clarify this section a little more? Just want to make sure it's crystal clear for the stakeholders.
Exactly that. And the sources highlight some really useful phrases, kind of like email lifeboats for tone.
Like what?
Well, to soften corrections, things like, there seemed to be a small issue with, or I might have spotted a slight inconsistency here.
Okay.
To suggest an improvement, always frame it collaboratively. It might be helpful to add, or perhaps we could consider. And critically, always try to invite input. I'd appreciate your thoughts on this, or what do you think about this approach? Makes it a two-way street.
Right, not just a directive coming down. Okay, let's tackle the really tough one. High-stakes conflict. We've got the politeness down, but what if there's a fundamental disagreement? Say, you think a colleague's entire budget proposal is flawed and you feel strongly about a different way. How do you handle that constructively?
This is where you really need that skill of decoupling the idea from the person.
Decoupling? Explain that.
You have to make sure your colleague doesn't feel like your opposition to their idea is an attack on their intelligence or their work ethic.
Okay, so how do you do that when you strongly disagree?
You don't just reject the idea outright. You reframe the issue. Find common ground or a shared goal.
So back to the budget example. In the meeting, I shouldn't say, that budget just won't work, we have to start over. What's the strategic way in?
You reorient the conversation towards a shared challenge. Maybe something like, that's an interesting direction, and I really admire the ambition in this plan. I am wondering, though, how we could address the budget implications of Plan A without pushing back our Q3 launch timeline. Maybe we could brainstorm that together.
So you shift it from your idea is bad to how do we solve this constraint together?
Exactly. That's leader language. You're focusing on the shared problem, not pointing fingers.
And that connects directly to building real team harmony, doesn't it? Because harmony isn't just about everyone being nice all the time.
Not at all. It's about creating a culture of trust and respect where people can disagree, even strongly, without fearing personal attacks or, damaging relationships.
So how do we build that culture?
A lot of it comes down to small, consistent acknowledgments. The sources call them harmony builders.
Yeah.
Simple things like, I really appreciate your input on that. It was really helpful. Or, hey, let's work together on getting this proposal right.
Just this little positive affirmation.
Yeah. Small, specific, and genuine. They set the stage for productive collaboration, even when things get tough.
Okay, but what about when the feedback is truly negative? Like someone is consistently missing deadlines or their performance really isn't up to par. How do you turn that necessary criticism into something, motivating, not just crushing?
Again, the absolute key is focusing rigorously on the issue, the behavior, and its impact, never on the person or their character.
So instead of attacking their reliability, like you're always late with your reports, that shows you're not committed, which sounds awful.
Right. That attacks their identity. Guaranteed defensiveness.
So what's the constructive alternative?
You frame it as an observed pattern that needs a joint solution. Something like, hey, I've noticed the last few reports have come in a bit behind schedule, and that impacts the timeline for the CFO review. Is there anything blocking your process right now or anything I can do on my end to help speed things up?
Okay. So you state the observation, the impact, and then offer help. Becomes about problem solving.
Exactly. It's empathy plus support. It turns a potentially negative confrontation into more of a coaching moment.
And circling back to the language itself, this consistent use of softer language, the might and could instead of must and need, it's not just being wishy-washy, is it?
Not at all. It's a specific rhetorical technique. It signals consideration and respect for others' autonomy. It's professional communication at a high level.
So instead of we must change this now, it's
We might want to consider changing this before we present it to the board. That shift from compulsion to consideration, that's diplomatic power.
got it. And that power then naturally extends to fostering real collaboration and inclusion, getting the best from everyone.
Absolutely. The sources really stress using expressions that actively pull people in, make them feel their perspective is valued.
Like what kind of phrases?
Things like, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, especially given your experience with X, or that's a great point and builds on Sarah's idea. I wonder if we can combine them for an even stronger result. What do you think?
So you're explicitly signaling that their input matters.
Exactly. Inclusion signals trust, and trust fosters contribution. Simple as that.
Okay, let's flip this whole thing on its head for a minute. We've spent all this time talking about how to give feedback effectively. What about how to receive it? Especially criticism. That gut reaction is usually defensiveness, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's biological almost. But receiving feedback gracefully is, honestly, one of the biggest markers of professional maturity.
Why is it so important?
Because your immediate response signals how coachable you are, how open you are to growth. You have to show gratitude, even if internally you're thinking, that's completely wrong. Just acknowledging it maintains that professional image.
Okay, so what's the mindset shift? Listen for the intent, not just the words.
Yes, try to hear the underlying point. And critically, don't jump immediately into explaining or justifying yourself.
So what do you say? What are those quick, non-defensive phrases that just acknowledge you've heard them?
Your first goal is just respectful acknowledgement. Buy yourself some time to process. Simple things work best. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate you flagging that. I'll definitely look into it.
Okay.
Or, if you know they have a point, that's a really helpful observation, thanks. I clearly missed that detail. Or even just, good point, I'll make that adjustment.
So you're validating their input without necessarily agreeing instantly or getting defensive.
Precisely. It keeps the relationship intact and the communication channels open for next time. It shows you value their perspective, even if the feedback stings a bit.
So when teams really start applying these things, the structure for feedback in meetings, the soft language for suggestions, the empathy when giving corrections, what's the result?
It's measurable, really. Productivity tends to go up because communication is clearer. Team stress often goes down because there's less fear around honest conversations, and decision-making can actually speed up.
Because people aren't walking on eggshells.
It's exactly. Good business communication isn't just some optional soft skill.
Yeah.
It fundamentally shapes the workplace culture you're building or breaking with every single email, every comment in a meeting.
So if we boil down everything from our sources today, it really lands on 3 core pillars for effective professional communication, doesn't it?
Seems like it. What would you say they are?
I'd say politeness, that careful choice of words, clarity, making sure your message is understood, and empathy, considering the other person's perspective.
Politeness, clarity, empathy.
Yeah.
I think that captures it perfectly. Master those 3 and you're well on your way to mastering the professional environment.
Okay, so before we wrap up, what's the final provocative thought you want to leave our listeners with today?
Okay, here it is. Take a moment this week and really consider how your current default communication style, especially when you're stressed or in a hurry, might be unconsciously shaping your professional reputation. Because every single word you use, every email you send, it either builds your credibility or chips away at it. So here's the challenge. Track your use of just one soft modal verb, maybe just could, in your next 3 important emails or conversations.
Just track could?
Yeah. And just notice. Pay close attention to whether you see even a subtle positive shift in how willing the other person is to collaborate or accept your point. You might be genuinely surprised by the immediate influence that one small linguistic choice can have. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really zeroing in on professional authority. Think about it. You, our listener, you might be prepping for a big presentation, maybe just trying to make your point in, a crowded international email chain. You've already got great ideas, solid content. But our mission today, it's giving you that shortcut, that way to sound professional, authoritative, just by focusing on how you deliver that brilliance.
Yeah, that's so often the missing piece, isn't it? We see really smart professionals struggle because, well, they treat business English like it's just words, vocabulary lists. But in those high-stakes situations, those meetings, what really separates the expert voice is mastering specific phrases. And transitions, too. They signal structure, confidence, trust. It's not just speaking English. It's using language strategically.
Exactly. So we've dug into the sources, pulled out the direct tools, maybe call them language hacks, things that can instantly elevate your professional image. We're not writing your presentation, of course, but we are aiming to give you that sort of secret weapon for delivering it powerfully.
Okay, let's get straight into the strategy then.
Right.
Like the opening. It's critical. You either grab their attention right then and there, or you risk losing them almost immediately. Think about the contrast between something weak, almost apologetic, like, okay, I will start my presentation now. Compare that to language that shows clear direction and, importantly, respect for everyone's time. A hesitant start just makes people think, maybe they're not quite prepared.
I completely agree. And the sources really hammer this home. The best openings. They're short, they're confident, and they point the way. They instantly establish you as the one guiding the information. So for example, if you want to build that connection, get buy-in right away. Maybe something like, I'm excited to share some key insights today that could really help us boost our results. Or you could be more direct. Okay, let's dive into our main topic, exploring how this new strategy is likely to impact the next quarter.
Yes, and the key thing there is the psychological shift it creates. You're not waiting for permission. You're claiming the floor. You're setting the agenda. Take that classic office scenario. Instead of opening a meeting with a really vague, we have some updates, try sparking some curiosity. You could say something like, right, today we're going to explore 3 pretty surprising results from our latest campaign and, crucially, what they mean for our next move. See how that frames the next 30 minutes? It becomes a mission, a search for solutions.
That makes sense for good news. But what if you're presenting something difficult, a challenge, maybe potential bad news? How do you use a powerful start then without, sounding overly optimistic or misleading?
That's a really good question, because a power start isn't necessarily about forced enthusiasm. It's about clarity, control. If the news is challenging, you open with that same clarity and direction. So instead of, we have a problem, you might say, okay, before we begin, I want to clearly outline our main objectives for this discussion. And that includes directly addressing the key challenges we faced last quarter. You're signaling, control, structure, even when the topic is tough.
Okay, so it's about framing.
Exactly, framing. And that same clarity works perfectly for emails, too. I'd like to share some key findings from a recent analysis. These could really shape our upcoming projects. You frame the information as valuable, as actionable, whatever the actual content might be. Hashtag there too. Structuring your communication with transition phrases. Okay, so you've grabbed their attention. What's next? Well, probably the biggest mistake people make after a strong start is jumping between ideas. Brilliant ideas, maybe, but without signposting the connections, without those little bridges. When you do that, you actually overload the listener. They're using mental energy just trying to figure out how point A connects to point B, instead of actually absorbing what you're saying. Transition phrases solve this. They're like linguistic signposts.
Right, so they're not just polite filler words. That's interesting. They're actually a necessary tool.
Yeah.
They manage the audience's mental load, fight off that information fatigue. They make your argument feel, well, joined up, cohesive, not just scattered thoughts. And for presentations, these clear directional signals are just vital if you're changing topics. Okay, let's move on to the next point. Simple. Or maybe that brings us neatly to our next section. And if you're making a bigger shift, like moving from analyzing the problem to proposing a solution, you need a strong pivot. Something like, right, now that we've covered the main findings, let's focus specifically on solutions.
And don't forget, these aren't just for speaking. They're incredibly useful in writing too. Highly transferable. Think about wrapping up a long email thread. You can use a transition phrase to signal closure, ensure everyone's on the same page. Like, okay, before we finalize this, let's quickly review the key points we've discussed. That forces a neat summary.
Good point.
And in a meeting, maybe one that's moving quickly, you can provide that clear pivot point. All right, now that we've covered the main updates, let's move on to clarifying next week's goals. It's simple, but that phrase stops the conversation drifting. It keeps things logical, which, let's be honest, is a hallmark of effective leadership, right? Keeping things on track. Tag 3. Using emphasis phrases to highlight key takeaways.
Okay, so we've got the strong start, we've got the structure with transitions, but the sources also pointed out people just forget stuff. Details vanish quickly. So how do we make sure they remember the important bits? How do we use language to basically draw a big circle around the must-remember point? That's where emphasis comes in, I guess?
Precisely. It's about emphasis. And you need specific business English phrases designed just for that, for flagging the critical information. Think of them as reassurance tools almost. When you use them, you're subtly telling your audience, relax, pay attention to this bit, I'll tell you exactly what matters. It stops them worrying about missing the main point in a sea of detail.
Right.
So some standard ones you hear are, the key takeaway here is very direct. It's important to highlight that. Slightly more formal, maybe. What really matters here is cuts straight to the point. And if you really want to land it, let me stress one important point.
Right, and the crucial insight, I think, is that you lead with the interpretation, not just the raw fact. Like that sales data example you mentioned. The forgettable way is just, sales improved this month, flat. But if you use an emphasis phrase, you deliver the fact and its significance together. Look, the key takeaway here is that our sales improved by 15%, which clearly shows that our new strategy is actually working. Suddenly, you haven't just reported data, you've validated a whole strategy, much more powerful.
Exactly. And that clarity is just as vital in writing, especially if you need approval or you're confirming success. Say, in an email confirming a client signed off. You don't want that buried. Use the phrase to make it pop. Just wanted to flag this. It's important to highlight that the client has approved the proposal, so we can now proceed to the next phase. It's unambiguous, it's professional, and it ensures the right action happens immediately. No confusion. #head24. Presenting data confidently and professionally.
Okay, let's talk data. Presenting charts, numbers. This seems to be a point where professionalism can wobble a bit. You know, when people just read numbers off a slide, they can sound, like the critique said, a bit robotic. How do we weave in that analytical language? How do we make the delivery sound like confident interpretation, not just reading aloud?
Yeah, the authority comes from using phrases that smoothly bridge the gap between here's the visual and here's what it means. When the numbers look good, you naturally want to frame it positively, reflecting achievement. So, as you can clearly see from the chart here, there's been pretty steady growth over the last 3 months. Or, perhaps, these numbers, well, they clearly show just how effective our new approach has been.
Makes sense. But, you know, professional life isn't always rosy charts pointing upwards. Being able to present challenging data, maybe disappointing data, with that same confidence, that feels like a real mark of leadership. What language should people use then? With the news isn't great, or they need to address, say, a dip in performance?
Right, that's where the language shifts slightly towards transparency, but also refocusing. It's crucial. You don't try to hide the setbacks. That erodes trust. Instead, you frame them as inflection points, opportunities to learn or adjust. So instead of just saying, yeah, our profit dropped, which sounds passive, maybe even defeated, you could state, okay, while the data does show a dip in Q3 performance here, this actually allows us to refocus our resources more effectively on Project X and also address that underlying market shift we discussed.
So you acknowledge it, but pivot immediately to action or learning.
Exactly. Or you might use phrases that balance things out. So based on this data, we can conclude that while customer satisfaction remains high, which is great, our delivery times clearly require immediate attention. You pair the good with the bad, the finding with the challenge. It positions you as proactive, strategic, not just a reporter of facts.
And that applies straight away to written reports too, doesn't it? When you attach that latest performance report to an email, you shouldn't just send it. You need to guide the reader. Something like, please find attached the latest performance report. As you'll see, our conversion rates have improved consistently this quarter. However, the graph also demonstrates a clear need to restructure our ad spend in Region B. Give them the headline interpretation up front, #tag 5, building persuasion and handling pressure.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Managing pressure. We all feel it, right? High stakes, important meeting, tough questions. When that nervousness hits, the sort of default reaction for many is to freeze up or maybe ramble. But there are actually some very natural English filler phrases, not ums and ahmas necessarily, but phrases that buy you a few crucial seconds, thinking time, without making you sound unsure. In fact, they can make you sound more thoughtful.
Okay, like tactical pauses.
Exactly. Tactical pauses disguised as thoughtful consideration. So if you get hit with a tough question, instead of silence or, let's take a moment to look at this more closely, buys you time. Or, That's a great question. Let me explain how I see it, step by step. Structures your thinking, maybe. Interesting point. If we think about this from another angle, opens up possibilities. What's really essential here is realizing that a short pause, used strategically, isn't weakness. It adds weight. That ability to pause makes you seem considered, thoughtful. And thoughtfulness, well, that's foundational for confident leadership.
That's a great way to frame it. Connecting that self-management, handling the pressure, directly to showing authority. Okay, so once you've managed the pressure, maybe block yourself that moment. Then we pivot to actually taking charge again, using that persuasive language, that leadership language. This is where you move beyond just reporting facts, right? It's about defining the path forward, inspiring confidence, maybe even demanding action. And this involves using language that frames things positively, focuses on opportunity, presents results almost as certainties if the plan is followed. Things like, look, we can achieve truly remarkable results if we act decisively now. Or, this strategy offers a powerful opportunity for significant growth. Focus on the upside. Maybe direct focus. Let's really focus on the benefits this change will bring everyone. Or emphasize the positive outcome. This approach ensures greater efficiency and, crucially, better teamwork. It's strategic language that shifts the whole tone from passive analysis to active motivation.
Yes. And that's how it all ties together, you see. Imagine you're concluding a really critical meeting. You've started strong, you've structured it well with transitions, highlighted the key data points, handled tricky questions gracefully using those thinking phrases. Now you need commitment. You need action. You can wrap it up with definitive, motivating language. Okay, so if everyone is broadly in agreement, let's move forward with this plan starting Monday and agree to review progress this time next week. That structure the conditional agreement, if everyone agrees, followed by clear, immediate action. Let's move forward, review progress. It does several things. It establishes clarity, it inspires motivation, and it affirms trust in the decision you've collectively reached. It's a powerful closing. #tag outro.
Right, so we've covered quite a bit today, 5 really foundational areas of strategic communication, moving, I hope, way beyond just simple English lessons to provide some genuine language hacks for projecting authority and being more persuasive.
Definitely. And remember, these phrases, these techniques, they're ultimately tools for connection, for structure, for managing your professional image, especially in international settings. Oh, and a really great habit to get into. Adapt your presentation language for your email follow-ups. After you give a talk, make it formal. Send that email. Subject: summary and key takeaways from today's presentation. Inside: thanks for attending today. Please find the summary and key takeaways we discussed below. It reinforces your message, makes it stick.
That's a practical tip. Okay, so as you, our listener, look toward your next professional interaction, maybe that presentation, that email, that meeting, here's a final thought for you to mull over, building on those pillars we discussed. Clarity, motivation, trust. How might adopting just one of these techniques, maybe it's framing challenging data proactively like we discussed, or perhaps using a really confident closing statement, how might that one small change subtly shift the way your international colleagues perceive your leadership potential, maybe even as soon as next week?
Yeah, just try one, experiment. Pick one phrase or technique from today, apply it consciously in your next interaction. Go apply what you've learned and, well, see what difference it makes. You might be surprised.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into something really interesting about influence at work. It turns out it's not just about your job title. A huge part of it, maybe the biggest part, is actually the words you choose. So our mission today is to basically shortcut that learning curve. We want to give you some specific business English phrases that can help you sound more influential, trustworthy, and, confident almost instantly.
That's absolutely right. It's fascinating how just a few keywords can shift the dynamic completely. Think about a manager who just tells people what to do versus a leader who inspires them. Often the difference boils down to maybe 4 or 5 specific phrasings. And this applies everywhere, right? Leading a big meeting, writing that crucial client email, or even just getting your team on board with a new idea. The language you use really decides if people lean in, listen, or if they just, mentally check out.
Exactly. Because persuasion, when you really think about it, isn't about forcing someone to agree with you. It's more about using what some call soft power, helping others see the value in what you're proposing. You guide them towards your conclusion gently instead of just ordering them to get there.
Mm-hmm. And linguistically, it's quite clever how it works. Let's take a really blunt, controlling phrase. We should do this. It uses that imperative mood. It sort of sets up a hierarchy immediately. And honestly, in many workplaces, that kind of phrase just triggers resistance almost automatically.
Yeah, you feel pushed. But compare that to something like, I strongly believe this approach could bring better results, or even this strategy presents a great opportunity for us to grow.
See the difference. It's huge. The first one is a command. The second is more like an invitation. Let's explore this potential game together. You shift from this impersonal, almost obligatory feeling to expressing personal confidence, but it's backed by a potential benefit for them or for us. That gentle guidance, that's the soft power we're talking about. It's really the core of effective leadership communication.
Okay, great. Let's jump right into that with our first area then, the language of collaboration. This is so crucial when you're trying to introduce new ideas, maybe in meetings or even emails. It's all about making that shift, isn't it? Moving away from language that sounds controlling to something genuinely collaborative.
Absolutely. Let's picture a common scenario. You're in an important project meeting, and you think a process needs a major overhaul. If you just jump in with something like, we need to change this immediately, what happens? Usually you get anxiety, defensiveness, or people just digging their heels in, wanting to stick with what they know.
Right, it puts people on the back foot immediately.
Yeah.
So how do you bring up that same idea, but signal partnership instead of just demanding compliance?
You use phrases that lower the perceived risk or barrier for them. Instead of demanding, you invite them to think alongside you. A really effective core phrase is something like, I'd like us to consider a new approach that might make this process smoother.
That's interesting. Let's break that down. The word consider, that seems really important there, right? It's not asking for agreement right away. It's more like asking for a moment of thought, a bit of exploration.
Exactly. Consider is a fantastic low-commitment verb. And also notice the pronoun us. I'd like us to consider. It creates this sense of shared ownership. It's our problem, maybe our solution. And then you have those modal verbs like might or could. They add just enough hedging to sound collaborative, not like you're issuing orders.
And what's really practical is how well this translates into writing, too. You can use that exact same structure in an email. Something like, I'd like to suggest an alternative plan that could help us save both time and budget. It sounds professional, it has weight, but it also feels accessible, not demanding. That's the sweet spot, isn't it? Polite, professional, but still showing you're confident in the value you're bringing.
And that confidence is the perfect bridge to our next point, building trust and navigating resistance. Because let's face it, people are much more open to listening, especially to challenging ideas, when they feel genuinely respected. You almost have to build this runway of empathy before your idea can really take off.
Okay, but how do you do that without sounding hesitant? I worry sometimes that if I open with too much, understanding or apology, it might make me sound weak. Especially if the stakes are high, like in a negotiation.
That's a really common concern, and it's valid. The key is finding the balance. You lead with credibility, you validate their viewpoint, but you don't apologize for your idea itself. You could start by grounding your suggestion in experience. From my experience, this could be an effective solution. See, you're asserting authority through your history, not just your rank.
Ah, okay. And if you know there might be pushback, getting ahead of it seems powerful. So instead of waiting for them to raise an objection, you can say something like, I completely understand your concern regarding the timeline. Here's how we can handle it. That feels like it would disarm people right away because you've acknowledged their reality first.
Precisely. You've validated them. Or even simpler, just a powerful validation phrase like, that's a valid point, let's explore it further. Notice you haven't actually agreed to change your mind or your strategy yet, but you've shown respect, and that buys you crucial goodwill and time to maybe reframe things. If you're presenting a change you know will be tough, frame it with empathy up front. I understand this shift may seem challenging, but here's why it's worth the effort.
That connects perfectly to dealing with outright disagreement. That moment where, let's be honest, a lot of us might panic a little or get defensive or just kind of stumble over our words. The really effective communicators, though, they use something we can call the alignment strategy.
Yes, the alignment strategy. The core idea is simple. When someone challenges you, your first instinct shouldn't be to reject their opinion. Instead, you show respect for their input, acknowledge it, and then immediately pivot to looking for common ground or a shared goal. The aim isn't to win the argument, it's to integrate perspectives.
Okay, so let's say I'm in a meeting, I propose a timeline, and someone pushes back hard saying it's too aggressive. Instead of just defending my timeline, I can pivot and say something like, that's an interesting perspective on the timing. Let's discuss how we might be able to combine both ideas to ensure we still hit the launch target.
Exactly that. You've shifted the dynamic. It's no longer their idea versus your idea. It's about finding a third way, a mutually beneficial outcome. And you use that same calm, authoritative approach in writing, too. Like, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate your point regarding cost controls. Here's what I propose as a middle ground that still maintains our quality standards. This kind of response almost guarantees a more productive discussion and, frankly, demonstrates real leadership.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about leading with authority, but also inclusiveness, especially in things like presentations. This is an area where I think people can sometimes try a bit too hard. They either sound robotic, reading off slides, or they dive so deep into technical jargon that they lose half the room. Real leadership communication needs that warmth, but also that undeniable confidence.
Absolutely. You need expressions that project authority but still feel approachable. In a presentation, for instance, instead of just wading through a long agenda, focus people right away on the key takeaway. You could say, here's the single most important thing I'd like you to take away from this presentation today. Or maybe, let's focus intently on the key benefits this new strategy offers our department specifically. It directs their attention.
And that confidence piece is crucial, but it needs to feel earned, rooted in something solid, like evidence, not just ego, right? So instead of weak language like, I think this is probably a good direction for us, you want something much stronger, backed by data if possible. This strategy has the potential to increase our sales by 20% based on our previous quarter's data. That lands differently.
It really does. And when you're summarizing a decision or an outcome, your language needs to project foresight, a sense of control. Avoid vague stuff. Use confident closing statements, for example. As discussed, implementing this approach will likely improve our performance across all regions in the next quarter. That kind of summary shows you don't just know what happened in the meeting, you have a clear view of what happens next.
And interestingly, true authority often comes through being inclusive. If you're leading a meeting, you actually strengthen your position as a leader by making sure everyone feels heard, not just the loudest person in the room.
Yes, using specific language to actively invite contributions is key. Simple things work best. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Or, could you share your experience with this process, maybe from the field perspective? And probably the most vital inclusive phrase when decisions are being made, let's make sure everyone's ideas are heard before we finalize our decision. That signals strength through careful, comprehensive leadership.
Okay, so we've talked about influence and collaboration, but influence is only half the equation, I suppose. If we bring this back to getting things done, persuasion doesn't mean much without clear action steps. Leaders need those simple, crisp phrases that prompt what happens next, efficiently.
Couldn't agree more. Otherwise, all that careful communication, all that goodwill you've built up, it just kind of dissipates. We need to transition smoothly into action language. Forget vague closings. Use clear, forward-moving phrases like, okay, let's take this forward immediately. Or maybe, I'd appreciate hearing your final perspective before we proceed to implementation.
And when you're setting deadlines, again, that collaborative yet firm approach works well. Something like, let's aim to finalize this plan by Friday, if that deadline works for everyone involved. It sets a clear expectation, but still respects people's capacity.
Exactly. And when you're writing those persuasive emails, the secret is still that balance. Decisive, yes, but not arrogant. If you need to highlight important updates, frame them as a benefit to the reader. Like, I'd like to draw your attention to a few updates in the new policy that could significantly benefit our department's workflow.
Right, focusing on the what's in it for them. And if you need something, like a small adjustment or a favor, framing it as a joint exploration feels better than a demand. For example, requesting a deadline change. Could we explore the possibility of extending this project deadline by maybe 2 days, just to ensure we meet the quality benchmark we're aiming for?
Perfect. And if you're trying to convince a manager or maybe a client about a bigger strategic shift, lean on your data and those strong belief statements we talked about. Based on our recent results, I strongly believe this revised approach will deliver significantly better outcomes for the client.
And lastly, those meeting endings. Avoid those weak, passive closes like, I guess that's all for today. It just fizzles out.
No.
Close with energy, action, and clarity. Thanks, everyone. That was a really productive discussion. I'll summarize the key decisions and next steps and get that over to you by end of day.
Yes. And, never underestimate the power of just simple, honest motivation, especially when the team is under pressure. If you're facing a really tight deadline, the leadership shines through in how you encourage them. Something genuine like, look, I know this timeline feels aggressive, but I truly believe in this team's ability to deliver exceptional quality. Let's just focus on nailing this first milestone together.
Okay, to kind of tie all these threads together, let's touch briefly on specific vocabulary. Are there certain power words that tend to make business English sound more persuasive, words that really grab attention and focus it on what matters?
Yes, there definitely are. These are words that often link directly to business success metrics, to KPIs. Think about words like opportunity, efficiency, results, value, support, growth, impact, and collaboration. They resonate in a business context.
Right. And when you weave them into your sentences naturally, they just seem to carry more weight, don't they? So instead of saying, maybe we could work together on this, you might say, this collaboration presents a clear opportunity to achieve significant impact on our future results.
Much stronger.
Exactly. Or instead of just, we could do this faster, try something like, we have an opportunity here to fundamentally improve our efficiency and foster better teamwork. These words instantly frame your suggestion around the strategic value or benefit, which makes your influence much more likely to stick. So wrapping this up, what are the key takeaways for you, our listener? We've talked about that linguistic shift, sounding polite but still confident, handling disagreement calmly with that alignment strategy, writing emails that actually drive action, and leading meetings or presentations with both authority and inclusiveness.
I think the core message really is that mastering this kind of leadership English isn't about having perfect grammar or knowing the biggest words, not at all. It's fundamentally about building trust. And you do that through clarity, through showing empathy, and through projecting genuine confidence in what you're proposing. When your words consistently carry those qualities, people just naturally tend to follow your lead.
So building on that, here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over this week. If the most effective communicators focus on integrating different ideas, on combined perspectives, rather than just trying to win every single argument, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What opportunities for real innovation, for mutual growth, are we missing out on when our default reaction is to reject feedback instead of trying to understand it, absorb it, and maybe even merge it with our own initial ideas? Think about how shifting that mindset could potentially transform the very next conversation you lead. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something absolutely fundamental, the business English you need for really effective team communication.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you can have the best skills in the world, right?
Mm.
But if your communication isn't clear, if it slows things down or even accidentally chips away at trust, well, those skills don't get you very far.
That's so true. And we're not just talking basic grammar here. This is really a deep dive into the strategic language choices you make.
Right.
Our goal today is to nail down those specific phrases and approaches that actually build collaboration, help you navigate tricky feedback, maturely.
Yeah, feedback's a big one.
Definitely. And ensuring crystal clear alignment in, pretty much every interaction, whether you're prepping for a big meeting, leading a project, or honestly, just trying to be a better team player day to day.
Okay, let's unpack this. So starting with that foundation, building collaboration, all the research points to this, doesn't it? Great results come from great teamwork. But getting the tone right,
yeah,
that feels tricky. You want it friendly, open, but still, professional enough, not too formal, not too casual.
Exactly. It's about shifting away from language that sounds like a command, that just puts people on the defensive instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you need language that signals, hey, we're in this together, shared ownership. If you just say, give me the update, it feels demanding.
Yeah, a bit abrupt.
Right. But if you frame it collaboratively, you're actually building a partnership in that moment.
I sometimes worry, though, if I'm always using softer language, like, say, let's work on this together and share updates by tomorrow, does that sound, not strong enough when I really need things done?
That's a really common concern. But the right tone isn't about being soft. It's actually about being efficient.
How so?
Well, when you use inclusive language, you foster what's called psychological safety. And that safety is actually crucial for getting things done well and quickly. People are more willing to engage. So, in a meeting, asking something like, could we coordinate our tasks to make sure everything stays on track? It shows respect for their autonomy, but it still clearly signals the need for alignment. It's polite and direct.
And I guess that translates directly to email too, right?
Right.
Instead of a blunt directive.
Exactly. Frame it as a joint effort. So you might write something like, let's collaborate on this project. I've added my notes below for your review. Or acknowledging what they've already done. I really appreciate your support on this. Let's touch base once we've completed the next step. It makes the other person feel valued, not just like they've been assigned a task.
Okay, sticking with collaboration.
Yeah.
Meetings.
Yeah.
Meetings are often where teamwork can, let's be honest, fall apart if one person dominates.
Oh, definitely.
So how could you use language strategically to pull others in, to make it more of a discussion?
You have to be explicit about inviting input. Don't just let silence hang there after you ask a question.
Right. Prompt people.
Yes. Say things like, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this approach. Or maybe, could anyone share an example from their experience that relates to this? You're actively showing that different perspectives are not just welcome, but needed. That's culture building.
And that applies even if you're the one leading the presentation, doesn't it?
Absolutely vital. Frame it up front as a discussion, not a monologue. You could say, I really want this to be an open discussion, not just me talking, or encourage interaction. Like, please feel free to jump in with your ideas or questions as we go along. It just keeps the energy up.
Okay, now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think, or maybe just difficult. Mastering professional feedback.
Ah, yes, the tightrope walk.
It really feels like it separates the good communicators from the great ones because the goal is so delicate. You need to help someone improve, but without, completely demotivating them.
It really is delicate. And the core insight from all the best practices is this. Feedback isn't criticism, or at least it shouldn't be. Its only purpose is to help someone get better.
Right. Improvement.
So structure is absolutely everything. You can't just launch into the negative part.
So the classic advice, start with something positive. But why is that so critical? Isn't it sometimes faster just to say what needs fixing?
It might feel faster in the moment, but it's far less effective long term. Research suggests starting with praise or some kind of acknowledgement actually primes the listener to be receptive.
Ah, okay. Lowers the defenses.
Exactly. If you lead with the criticism, often their brain just shuts down the listening part and starts preparing a defense. You lose them.
That makes a lot of psychological sense. Okay, so the structure is praise or acknowledgement first, then the specific measured suggestion, like you did a great job putting this report together. One small suggestion for next time would be to maybe add a summary slide.
Perfect. Or even simpler, just validating the effort. This presentation was really clear. I especially liked how you structured the argument. Then you can gently add the point for improvement.
And this works in writing, too, like in an email giving feedback on a draft.
Absolutely. Lead with respect for their effort. Something like, thanks so much for your work on this. Overall, it's looking really good. I just have a few minor suggestions below. It sets a constructive tone right away.
Okay, flip side, receiving feedback. This, for many people, is even harder. That instinct to defend yourself or explain why you did it that way.
Very common.
You can't sound defensive, even if you disagree a bit inside. So what language shows that you're receptive, that you have that growth mindset?
It's all about showing you've heard it, accepted it, and plan to act. Avoid phrases that start with, yeah, but, like the play.
Right, the but negates everything before it.
Totally. Instead, use simple, action-oriented phrases. Thanks for pointing that out. I'll make sure to adjust that. Or, that's a really helpful observation. I'll definitely keep that in mind next time.
It shows you're taking it on board.
Exactly. And professionalism often means being quick to implement. If your manager emails notes or reply like, got it, thanks for the feedback, I'll update the document and send over the revised version shortly, shows real maturity and commitment.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about clarity. Probably the biggest source of wasted time in, any organization, right? Lack of clarity.
Oh, absolutely. Especially with global teams, remote work. Ambiguity is just a killer. It leads to confusion, mistakes, rework.
So the key idea here isn't about using fancy words, is it? It's the opposite.
Precisely. It's about short, simple, structured language. But crucially, it's also about confirming understanding. Never assume everyone's aligned.
You have to actively check.
You have to, especially at the end of a discussion or meeting. You need that summary moment. Okay, just to make sure we're all on the same page, let me quickly recap the main points and next steps.
That proactive confirmation feels really key. And even mid-discussion, right? Using specific phrases to make sure everyone's following.
Yes. Use really clear, almost pointed questions. Just to clarify, are we confirming the meeting for 3 p.m. our time? Or, okay, Let me make sure I've got this right. The new design needs to be finalized by Thursday. Correct. You're using language like a precision tool to prevent errors down the line.
Got it. And when you're assigning tasks, say in an email, that clarity needs politeness too, doesn't it? To keep that collaborative feel we talked about earlier.
Critical. Never use commanding language like, you need to do this by Friday. It just erodes teamwork.
So instead, frame it as a request, maybe with an offer of help.
Exactly. Something like, could you please handle this task? Let me know if you run into any issues or need any support. That little addition, let me know if you need support, makes a huge difference. It shows you're there as a resource, not just a taskmaster.
And this focus on clarity and confirming steps is even more important when you're coordinating across different departments, right? Like product and marketing or engineering and sales.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just assume they're talking to each other or understand each other's priorities. You have to be the bridge.
So what does that sound like?
It sounds like proactive alignment confirmation, for example. Okay, team, let's make sure our communication stays tightly aligned between both departments on this launch. Could everyone please post their progress updates by end of day Thursday so we can review together on Friday? It's structured, clear, and sets expectations.
This all really connects to a broader point, doesn't it? How the language we choose actually shapes the team culture. Specifically, building trust and showing appreciation.
It absolutely does. Because if people don't feel safe, if they don't trust that their voice matters or that mistakes won't be punished unfairly, they simply won't communicate openly, especially not about problems.
So you need language that explicitly invites that openness.
Yes. You need to state the cultural norm you want to see. Say things like, if anyone has any concerns about this approach, please feel free to share them now. Or maybe in a heated discussion, hold on, let's make sure everyone's perspective is heard before we decide. You're using words to actively create that safe space.
Okay, but life happens. Sometimes misunderstandings just occur. You get that email that makes your stomach clench. Maybe there's some tension brewing. How does a mature communicator use language to diffuse that?
Maturity here means taking responsibility for the clarity of the communication, even if you feel the other person misunderstood. Stay calm, stay polite, avoid anything that sounds like blaming.
So, no, you clearly didn't read my email properly.
Definitely not. Instead, you frame it as your potential lack of clarity.
Okay, so what would that sound like?
Something gentle like, I think there might have been a small misunderstanding. Let me try to clarify my point. Or the really professional approach. My apologies if my previous message wasn't clear. Here's what I meant to convey. That phrase, apologies if my message wasn't clear, is gold. It just resets the tone immediately.
That's a great phrase. Okay, and finally, maybe the highest level of communication skill here, appreciation.
Yes. We often overlook this, but genuinely recognizing effort and contribution is probably the most powerful motivator there is. It builds loyalty in a way that, frankly, money can't always buy.
But it needs to be specific, right? Not just a generic good job.
Absolutely specific. Connect the praise directly to the impact or the skill demonstrated.
Give us a couple of strong examples.
Okay, instead of nice presentation, try great job on the presentation today. Those data insights you pulled out were incredibly helpful for the decision we needed to make. See the difference.
Yeah, much more impactful.
Or, your attention to detail on that final review really made this project a success. You caught things others missed. It validates the specific contribution.
And I guess you can do this for the whole team too, maybe via email after a tough project.
Definitely. A collective acknowledgement goes a long way. Something simple like, team, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you. Your dedication and teamwork over the last few weeks have been amazing, especially getting Project X over the line. It closes the loop and reinforces that positive behavior.
So what does this all mean when we pull it all together?
Well, we've really unpacked 4 key pillars, haven't we? First, consciously using friendly yet professional language to really encourage collaboration and that sense of shared ownership.
Right.
Second, mastering the delicate art of feedback, both giving it constructively, using that praise-first structure, and receiving it gracefully, showing you're ready to act. Third, making absolute clarity and mutual respect your top priority in all communication to cut out that ambiguity and wasted effort. Confirming understanding.
Okay.
And finally, harnessing the power of specific, genuine appreciation to build motivation and deep loyalty within the team.
It feels like ultimately the words you choose aren't just words. They're the actual building blocks of how well your team or even your whole organization functions.
That's it exactly. When you start using these kinds of strategic phrases we've talked about, you're doing so much more than just being polite or clear. You're actively fostering understanding, you're building connection, and you're generating trust. And those three things, understanding, connection, trust well. No organization can truly thrive or grow without them. You turn talk into real connection.
Okay, let's dive right in. You, our listener, you're already operating at a really high professional level. You've got those foundational skills down pat, clear emails, smooth meetings, you deliver information with confidence. But now you're looking for that next level, right? We're talking about moving beyond just, speaking professional English. We're aiming for the final domain, leadership communication.
Yeah.
So our mission today is to really dig into the research, pull out the language that helps you influence, impress, and crucially inspire.
That's exactly it. And we're not just talking about swapping out a few words here and there. These are strategic linguistic tools. We've gone through sources focusing on executive presence, on effective team guidance, and we've defined these power phrases, these strategies that can genuinely lift your professional language from just good to truly exceptional. And the core shift, it's fundamental, really, something we saw again and again in the material we reviewed. Your communication needs to carry authority. It's no longer just about sharing information. It's about guiding people, motivating them, building trust with, every sentence you use.
Yeah, leadership isn't just the title on your door, is it? It's about the conviction in your voice, in your tone. And that brings us right to the very first practical change we pulled from the sources, getting rid of uncertainty. We need to replace that hesitant, maybe uncertain language with clear, confident expressions. That's what instills security in the people you're leading.
It's fascinating, actually, how easy it is to inject doubt without even meaning to. Our sources point out that this kind of tentative language, it's often used as like a form of politeness, but it can really backfire. It just signals your own hesitation. So let's contrast this really common mistake, something you hear all the time, saying, I think we can maybe try this approach.
Right. That phrase just screams hesitation from the speaker, doesn't it? And that immediately creates insecurity for the team. They're left thinking, well, does our leader even believe this is going to work?
Precisely. And the confidence statement, the one that shows conviction, commitment, sounds quite different. I recommend we move forward with this approach. When you use these power phrases like I recommend, I believe, or let's proceed, you're showing certainty. And that certainty is really the foundation. It allows your team to feel secure enough to follow your lead.
Oh, I get the commitment part, but I need to push back just a little on I recommend.
Yeah.
What if you're in a really collaborative environment? Doesn't saying I recommend sometimes sound a bit autocratic, maybe too prescriptive, especially if you're trying to get buy-in?
That's a really key distinction, and our sources definitely address it. The difference between being prescriptive and showing collaborative certainty, it lies in what comes next. Using I recommend shows you've evaluated things, you've taken ownership of the direction. That's the authority piece. If you want collaboration, you follow it up with an open question, not just a tentative statement. So you might say, I recommend we move forward with this approach. Now, what are the immediate risks you all see with this? See? You keep the authority by providing direction, but you're still inviting that crucial input.
Okay, that distinction is really important. So it's about being certain in your position, but not shutting down the conversation. Got it. Now let's take this authoritative tone and move it into more formal settings, like meetings.
Right. In a leadership role, you're not there to dominate the room. You're there to guide the discussion. And one of the clearest signals of leadership is how you open a meeting, not just politely, but purposefully. The aim is to sound completely in control, but still, absolutely respectful of everyone there.
And that opening is really where you set the tone and establish control, isn't it? It has to be clear, calm, really focused. A powerful opener defines the mission right away and sets up accountability before you even get into the thick of the discussion.
Exactly. One source we looked at highlighted this specific opener as a kind of perfect template for executive guidance. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, I'd like to outline our key goals for today's discussion. By the end of this meeting, I want us to have clear action steps and responsible persons assigned. Notice how every bit of that serves a purpose. It sets boundaries, guarantees an actionable outcome.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky in practice. Diplomatic redirection. Leading a meeting inevitably means handling disagreement, or maybe redirecting someone who's gone off on a tangent without sounding harsh or just dismissive. You can't just shut down an idea, but you have to steer the conversation back to those goals you outlined.
This is where we move from just being polite to being strategically polite. If you just blurt out, that idea is off topic, well, you create friction. You might shut down future contributions. The successful phrases that came up in our research use the strategy of acknowledge and redirect. You start by validating the speaker, acknowledging their point. That protects the relationship.
Okay, so give us some of those phrases. What achieves that dual goal?
Right, so instead of just dismissing the idea, you could try. I see your point, and that's valuable insight, but let's maybe explore another perspective that directly addresses goal number 3. Or, if the tangent is, well, completely off track. That's an interesting idea, perhaps for the long-term roadmap. However, for today, we probably need to align our focus back to the main objective of this quarterly review. Phrases like that are strong enough to guide the direction, but they keep the exchange positive, respectful.
The psychological takeaway there seems to be that you're communicating, okay, I heard you, your idea isn't bad, but it's not for right here, right now. You stay in control without crushing morale. Let's shift gears now to writing, specifically email, because email tone, arguably, it's even more critical, right? Your written words represent you, maybe the whole company, without any help from body language or vocal tone. So the writing needs to be direct, yes, but also polite, and really importantly, structured for someone who's likely drowning in emails.
Absolutely. And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, structuring your email efficiently, well, that's probably the highest form of respect you can show for someone's time in this digital age. People don't really read emails anymore, do they? They scan them. So we recommend using this simple but really effective framework we pulled from our communication research. Start, purpose, action, close. We call it SPAC.
PIGS, I like that acronym.
Yeah.
Sounds like it creates instant clarity, cuts down on that endless back and forth.
It really does.
Yeah.
Let's break down how efficient it is using, say, an example of a progress update email. Subject line is clear. Next steps for project timeline. The content starts with a positive acknowledgement, maybe, thank you for the great effort last week. Simple. Then, it clearly states the purpose, something like, to ensure we stay on schedule and mitigate any unforeseen risks. Then, and this bit is crucial, it hits the necessary action points right there in the middle. Please share your individual progress updates by Friday at 5 p.m. Clear deadline, clear task. And finally, it closes with the broader outcome or next step. I will consolidate these updates into a comprehensive report for the steering committee next week.
Yeah, it's short, crystal clear, gives direction and a timeline, but doesn't sound aggressive at all. It's writing designed to get things done fast. And that kind of structure must be absolutely essential when you have to do maybe the hardest thing in leadership writing, saying no.
Oh, absolutely. When you have to say no in writing, the key is to avoid negative language almost entirely. Focusing on the negative, on what can't be done, it just damages rapport.
Right. So instead of focusing on what we can't do, like that standard phrase, unfortunately, we can't approve that request right now. We need to switch it. Switch to a solution-based phrase that emphasizes priorities instead.
Precisely. You protect that professional relationship while still staying firm on what the organization needs right now. A much better alternative is something like, at this moment, we need to prioritize the launch of Project X, but we'll definitely revisit this funding request during the Q3 budget cycle. See? You haven't really said a hard no, you've said later, and you've given context, a reason. Similarly, if you disagree with, say, a proposed metric in a report, instead of just writing back, I don't agree, which feels really abrupt, try something like, let's take another look at the supporting data together and evaluate the potential long-term impact before we finalize this decision. It's collaborative, but still clearly signals a need for review. That's how you maintain clarity and harmony.
Okay, let's move to the stage. Presentations. This is where leadership communication really needs that blend of clarity, the hard facts, but also passion, or what our sources kept calling strategic energy. Facts inform, sure, but it's that compelling narrative, that sense of purpose that truly inspires people.
The key strategy here is about shifting the focus immediately. Move away from just raw data points towards the purpose. Great leaders, they tend to avoid just jumping straight into dense charts and numbers. That can easily overwhelm an audience right at the start. Instead, they often begin with maybe a relatable example, or even more effectively, with the ultimate goal that everyone in the room actually cares about.
That start with one idea, again, it's so key for engagement. Can you give us that impactful opening example? The one that focuses on the goal, not just the metrics.
Sure. So instead of clicking straight to a slide packed with graphs, imagine starting like this. Before we dive into the specific numbers and metrics that quantify our recent work, let's just take a moment to think about our ultimate goal here, which is to make our customer experience smoother, faster, better than anyone else in our industry. That shared purpose. That's what really drives today's discussion. Something like that hooks the audience straight away because it connects to emotion, to a shared interest, not just dry logic.
Yeah, it totally reframes it. It sets the stage so the data is seen as evidence towards achieving that bigger, more inspiring objective. And leaders absolutely have to close with impact, with vision. You just can't trail off with a polite, well, that's all, or any questions.
Oh, a flat closing is such a missed opportunity. It's a failure of leadership communication, really. Those final moments are often the most memorable. Our research consistently showed that successful presentations close by reinforcing the collective potential, the next steps, the vision. You want phrases that project forward, like, let's make this plan a success together, knowing that the foundation we're building here is setting our trajectory for the next decade. Or maybe something like, I really look forward to seeing how this strategic shift transforms our next quarter into a period of, well, unprecedented growth. You leave them with a vision, not just a summary of data points.
Okay, so we've covered the structure for meetings, emails, presentations. Let's talk about that final polish, using high-impact vocabulary. For our listeners who've already mastered the basics, this is about upgrading word choice to sound more professional, more precise, more competent.
Precision in your language, it signals you're operating at that strategic level. And why swap a simple verb for a more formal one? Well, because the word itself carries a different weight, a different level of commitment. When you swap out, say, try for implement, or maybe initiate, you're not just trying to sound fancy. Try implies effort, maybe uncertainty. Implement implies committed action, follow-through, completion.
I see the difference clearly there. And swapping fix for resolve or address, that changes the perception too, doesn't it? Fixing often feels tactical, maybe even temporary. Resolving suggests a more comprehensive, final, strategic solution.
Exactly right. And other really essential swaps include changing talk about to the more formal, more collaborative discuss, and replacing the rather vague think about with strategic terms like consider or evaluate. These aren't just, fancy synonyms. They demonstrate that you are absolutely confident operating within that sophisticated business environment.
And all that confidence still needs that secret balance we keep touching on. Avoiding sounding either too blunt, too direct, or maybe too soft, too hesitant. It comes back to this idea of professional packaging.
Yes, exactly. Think of it like wrapping a gift. The message inside, maybe it's an instruction, maybe a request that doesn't change, but how you deliver it, how you package it, that's what maintains rapport. If you're too blunt, you risk sounding accusatory. If you're too soft, you risk being ignored or not taken seriously.
Okay, so let's take a common scenario. Instead of saying something blunt, maybe even accusatory, like, you didn't send me the file, I need it now. How do we apply that professional packaging?
You apply these polite, softening phrases. They shift the dynamic away from blame towards respectful delegation or request. So instead of, you didn't send me the file, you use something like, could you please resend the file when you get a moment? That, could you please? And the, when you get a moment, that's the packaging. It acknowledges their time while still firmly stating the need for the file. Likewise, instead of something aggressive like, this plan is just wrong, you frame it constructively. We might need to adjust a few details in this plan to ensure we hit those final targets.
That approach feels much more collaborative, definitely. So, stepping back a bit, what does this look like when you put all three types of communication, meetings, emails, presentations together? Because a leader often has to deliver the same core message across different settings.
Right. And this integration piece, that's really the hallmark of advanced communication. The core message, the substance, it stays consistent. But the tone, the vocabulary, the specific phrasing that has to adapt perfectly to the setting and the audience. Let's use that progress update example one last time to illustrate. The underlying message is identical in all cases. We need to understand what happened last week so we can plan effectively for this week.
Okay, so in a high-stakes team meeting, maybe where the focus is on deciding the next steps, the language needs to be really action-oriented.
Exactly, you might say. Okay, everyone, let's quickly go through last week's progress before we collaboratively plan our next steps and assign clear accountability for this week. Very direct, very forward-looking.
Then in an email, perhaps to your manager, where the focus is more on documentation and providing an update for review, the language shifts. It becomes more formal, right?
Precisely, it might be. Please find attached the updated progress summary covering last week's activities for your comprehensive review. Formal, concise, purpose-driven.
And finally, in a presentation, maybe to a client or the board, where the focus is really on results and painting a positive picture, the language becomes more visual, perhaps more celebratory.
You got it. Something like, here's a visual overview highlighting how we've significantly improved our performance metrics this past quarter, clearly demonstrating the immediate return on investment from our recent initiatives. The underlying message reporting progress is seamless across all three, but the delivery, the packaging, shifts perfectly to suit the medium and the audience's needs.
So when you boil it all down,
Ultimately, the final secret, if you want to call it that, of really great business English. It isn't just found in grammar books or even long vocabulary lists. It's fundamentally about mindset. It's that confidence that comes from knowing you belong in that leadership role, knowing that your words carry weight, that they matter.
speak as if you belong in the room. Write as if your words demand action. Present as if your ideas genuinely inspire. It's this consistent practice, backed up by these kinds of strategic phrases we've discussed, that really turns a good communicator into a truly respected leader.
And maybe here's a final thought for you, our listener, to carry into your week. This was perhaps the single most powerful recurring takeaway from all the sources we analyzed. What if you started every single communication, whether it's a quick one-line email or a major presentation, by consciously defining the intended emotional response you want to create? Think. Trust, security, inspiration, urgency, whatever it is. Define that emotional goal before you even choose your word. How might your daily professional language immediately change if you did that? Focus on that outcome, and the confident, impactful language is much more likely to follow naturally.
And that wraps up our Business English series, packed with the most powerful phrases for meetings, emails, and presentations. If today's episode helped you sound more confident and professional, don't just stop here. Keep practicing every single day.
Exactly. Re-listen to these parts, note down your favorite phrases, and start using them at work or in class. The more you use them, the faster they'll become part of your natural English.
And if you want more lessons like this, from vocabulary to real-life business conversations, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode.
You can also share this episode with a friend or colleague who wants to improve their business English. Learning together always makes it easier.
Reminding you that professional English isn't just about words, it's about confidence and clarity. Helping you find your English voice, one phrase at a time. And you've been listening to English Speak Pulse, where fluency begins with you.